Chapter 498. That night, the female military officer who had previously looked for Fang Xinjian and warned Fang Xinjian knelt down at the entrance of the building, asking for forgiveness from Fang Xinjian. In the planetary defense, all the survivors who were related to this incident were locked up on charges of antisocial activities, awaiting trial by the military court. Simultaneously, a tremendous amount of information regarding Li Shuanghua from the Federation was sent over to Fang Xinjian. The entire Federation seemed to have completely submitted to Fang Xinjian's martial prowess. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in the sky above a small island that had not been marked on the map, Fang Xinjian stood in void space, scanning the streams of light waves with his heaven's perception as he observed the situation on the small island. Although he had left Demonic City, the only region that overlapped with Miracle World, and the ether particles were almost non-existent, to a demigod like Fang Xinjian, the energy in his body was sufficient for him to do many things. Li Shuanghua had secretly set up a large number of laboratories across the world, and even Fang Yuehe did not know about most of them. It was because Li Shuanghua had used the Earth's Federation's resources and a large number of experts that the Earth's Federation's upper echelon had grasped a lot of information about the laboratories. Right now, the largest laboratory was under Fang Xinjian's feet. It was also the laboratory where Fang Xinjian's mother's corpse was most likely to be placed. However, it could also be the place where Li Shuanghua was hiding. Therefore, before Fang Xinjian really invaded, he still scanned the base carefully and gathered information. Seems to be not here? Fang Xinjian's eyes narrowed slightly, and at the next moment, he entered the spatial gaps and headed in the direction of the base. This time, he directly walked around the entire base, and found that most of the laboratories were conducting all kinds of human experiments. They had turned some men and women who had come from an unknown place into Magic Prince warriors and then used the bodies of these Magic Prince warriors to experiment on forging divine weapons. Throughout the entire process, those men and women were like lab rats, being grabbed and controlled by many mechanical arms from the beginning to the end. They were unable to resist at all. Such bloody and cruel experiments made even Fang Xinjian's brows twitch. Even in Miracle World, in order to increase their military power, the various countries would not do such antisocial things. This was something that only an evil cult like the Serene Shrine would do. Especially when he thought about the fact that his mother's body was right here, the murderous intent in his heart grew even stronger. As he walked, Fang Xinjian sent out streams of sword intent into the brains of the staff members. As long as he found his mother's corpse, he would immediately detonate his sword intent, turning all of them into brain-dead and vegetative states. Finally, after walking for so long, Fang Xinjian found his target at the lowest level of the laboratory, a secret room made of pure metal. He stepped out of the void and looked at the ice coffin that was over 3 meters tall and emitting waves of cold air. There was a complicated look in his eyes. The ice coffin was very thick, but Fang Xinjian had heaven's perception and could clearly see what was happening inside the ice coffin. It was a lady who looked to be in her 20s, as if she had gathered all the spiritual qi in the world. She was dressed in white palace clothes and lay inside, looking as if she was still alive. Her bright red lips, face, long eyelashes, and fair skin made her look as if she was still alive. However, what made Fang Xinjian's heart pound the most was her appearance. Her eyes, nose, and mouth all bore a 70% to 80% resemblance to Fang Xinjian's. They really look alike. It was a pity that through Fang Xinjian's heaven's perception, he could tell that the other party did not have any heartbeat or breathing. Fang Xinjian looked straight at the ice coffin with an extremely complicated expression. He stood there in a daze as if he was in a daze. Is this my mother? 10 minutes later, a plasma longsword appeared in void space with a flash, piercing toward the back of Fang Xinjian's head together with a black-clothed warrior. This black-clothed warrior was the person in charge of the base. He was a level 29 Magic Prince warrior, and also possessed the powerful ability to teleport. As Fang Xinjian had been in a daze for too long, the black-clothed warrior had immediately discovered this intruder. He approached the other party carefully and then activated teleportation through the wall, wanting to deal Fang Xinjian with a single sword attack. From the looks of it, everything seemed to be very successful. The plasma longsword got closer and closer to Fang Xinjian, while Fang Xinjian continued to stare at the ice coffin in a daze, showing no reaction. The black-clothed warrior's eyes were filled with excitement. Has his mind wandered? Has his mind really wandered off? It's no wonder. After all, this is his own mother. It'd be strange if he didn't wander off after seeing such a scene. The black-clothed warrior thought of the commotion that Fang Xinjian had caused across the entire world, and then thought of the outcome of him killing Fang Xinjian with a single sword attack. The black-clothed warrior grew increasingly excited. At the next moment, the plasma longsword was already very close to Fang Xinjian's scalp. It was only when a few strands of Fang Xinjian's hair had been swept off that Fang Xinjian tapped out with a finger. A sword finger appeared strangely on the black-clothed warrior's forehead in a flash. A soft, crisp sound rang out, and the black-clothed warrior's body suddenly came to a stop. He lifted his head and looked in Fang Xinjian's direction, saying, "Good sword arts. This sword attack contains unrivaled sword intent and unrivaled sword force, destroying the opponent both physically and mentally. It's true that you have the right to challenge Madame Li Shuanghua. I shouldn't have challenged you. I'm the person in charge of this laboratory. My name is," with a p sound, the light pursuit sword ripples slashed the black-clothed man's throat. Fang Xinjian said calmly, "You're too weak. Even if you tell me your name, I won't be able to remember it. It's better for you to leave quietly." A hint of unwillingness flashed in the black-clothed man's eyes. However, this only lasted for 1 to 2 seconds before he collapsed completely. Both his consciousness and physical body had been killed. Fang Xinjian looked at the ice coffin before him, and his eyes were filled with grief. He suddenly thought of things that had happened many hours later. He thought of how he had been bullied since he was young, how he had been alone and without anyone to rely on, and how he had been without parents. With a sigh, Fang Xinjian instructed Tyrant, "Keep it in the gates of the netherworld." After finding his mother's corpse, Fang Xinjian had not thought of what to do with it. He only wanted to place it in the gates of the netherworld for now. However, just as he was about to do this, another vortex suddenly blossomed in the center of the ice coffin. In that instant, the entire ice coffin and the corpse were sucked into it. "Who is it?" Fang Xinjian glared. An overwhelming sword intent swept out in all directions. Tyrant also gasped, "It's the gates of the netherworld. The other party has also performed the gates of the netherworld." At the next moment, a black-clothed man suddenly appeared at the spot where the ice coffin had disappeared. Looking at the other party's silhouette, Fang Xinjian's countenance changed. It was because this black-clothed man was the one who had bestowed him the purple flames back at the Fang clan. Fang Xinjian said coldly, "Who are you? Why did you snatch away my mother's corpse?" Fang Xinjian tried to use his heaven's perception to scan the other party's body. However, he could only sense a stretch of pitch-black darkness and was unable to read anything. The black-clothed man looked at Fang Xinjian and said calmly, "Come and look for me after you've swept through Earth and become the Empire's #1. I'll be waiting for you in the City of Universal Truth." The City of Universal Truth was the headquarters of the Holy See of Truth, the #1 influence in Miracle World. It was the holy city of the Holy See of Truth, the City of Agreement. Fang Xinjian asked anxiously, "Who on earth are you?" "You know who I am." The man did not say another word. With a series of spatial fluctuations, he disappeared completely. Simultaneously, in the center of a huge ice cave below the North Pole's ice sheet, the physical body of the Fang clan's third son, Fang Yueming, floated in midair. His skin and flesh kept on moving up and down, exuding layers of green light. Below him, Li Shuanghua wore a grim expression as she carefully repaired Fang Yueming's body. However, the crucial thing was that Fang Yueming's brain had also been seriously injured by Fang Xinjian. There were over 10 billion nerve cells in the brain, and there were even more other tissues in the brain. Even though Li Shuanghua was a divine-level expert, it was still a great project for her to repair the several 10 billion cells in another person's body, as well as to accurately restore the various electrical signals and chemical reactions. After all, although Magic Prince warriors who had transitioned into divine-level experts had the support of diabolic energy and could perform all sorts of special diabolic abilities, possessing extraordinary powers that were even stronger than those of knights. However, in terms of the development of the human body, they did not have the specialty seeds, brain regeneration, or ether organs that knights had. Furthermore, she was afraid of being disturbed by others. This was why she had come under the North Pole's ice sheet and spent 2 days and 2 nights to barely pull Fang Yueming back from the gates of hell. However, despite this, she had only managed to hold onto his life temporarily. She would still need to spend a lot more effort before she could recover. Chapter 499. Just as Li Shuanghua was desperately trying to treat her son, a figure walked out slowly from outside the ice cavern. It was a young man with silver hair, wearing a white battle suit and a pair of black sunglasses. The young man looked at Li Shuanghua and said, "He, old Madame Fang, it seems that ever since you gave the Federation the order 12 hours ago, you haven't contacted the outside world. You probably don't know what's happening in the outside world, right?" Li Shuanghua turned to look at the silver-haired young man. He came from the Ford clan, which was one of the 5 great clans, and was known as the Thunder Monarch. He was also one of the 5 divine-level experts. He was also the youngest amongst the 5. Hearing the Thunder Monarch's words, Li Shuanghua said calmly, "Did that rebellious grandson of mine do something shameful again? However, our Fang clan will handle our own matters. After I've treated Ming'er, I'll personally head over to suppress that vile spawn. There's no need for you to worry." "Hee," the Thunder Monarch said with a smile, "I'm afraid that we'll only be able to suppress him if the 2 of us join forces." "The 2 of you joining forces? What kind of joke is that?" Li Shuanghua sneered, frowning. She was a divine-level expert. For her to personally suppress her own grandson, she had already become the laughingstock of the various clans. If she were to join forces with the Thunder Monarch, it would be a complete disgrace to all of them. However, the Thunder Monarch shook his head. "You'd better take a look at this first." The Thunder Monarch took out a silvery white sphere. At the next moment, the sphere shot out streams of light onto the ice wall, playing the scene of Fang Xinjian jumping off the ground and flying out of the atmospheric layer. Moreover, this scene had been edited, combining most of the scenes circulating on the internet and adding in images taken by satellites, making the entire scene appear even clearer and smoother. This is what Fang Xinjian did 12 hours ago. The Federation has already given in to him for now. It's said that he has just broken into your base on the small island in the Pacific Ocean and obtained your daughter's corpse, the Thunder Monarch said slowly. Right now, the Earth's Federation has secretly entered a state of global preparation for war. After all, neither they nor we can tolerate an overlord suddenly appearing above us. What do you think? Li Shuanghua closed her eyes. Her face was as calm as an ancient well, like a nun who had been meditating for many years. I didn't expect that vile spawn to be so talented. In just a short 2 years, he actually managed to cultivate a world-shaking sword technique. It's a pity that you don't know how to be loyal to your family despite possessing such power. Instead, you harm your elders and rebel against the Federation. With that, Li Shuanghua took a deep breath and said, "Since his battle strength has reached this level, we naturally need to join forces. However, since we've joined forces, we must pursue the greatest certainty. What do the others think?" A look of surprise flashed across the Thunder Monarch's face. He had not expected that the inflexible, stern, and unreasonable old woman in his heart would agree to join forces so easily. I don't know where Tiandao and Titan have gone to in Miracle World. The despot is willing to join us, but that black devil wants half of your daughter's corpse after everything is done. Li Shuanghua's eyes suddenly opened, and there seemed to be a flash of cold light in them. However, as she looked at her badly mutilated son and thought of Fang Xinjian's performance in the video, she held back the fury in her heart and said, "Getting a divine-level expert to take action. This price is considered normal." The Thunder Monarch smiled. "All right, then it's settled. Make your preparations. The Federation will need to gather their forces once again. We'll take action 1 month later. With 3 divine-level experts, the Federation's core forces, and our Ford clan's secret weapon, we'll definitely be able to successfully suppress him." The Thunder Monarch's body slowly faded away, but he was thinking about how Fang Xinjian was able to improve so rapidly within a short 2 years, even possessing power that could rival or even surpass that of a divine-level expert at level 29. "It's fine. After I capture you, I'll analyze you bit by bit." 2 hours later, Li Shuanghua sent out a letter to challenge Fang Xinjian, agreeing to have a battle in the Sahara Desert 1 month later. This piece of news was earth-shattering, causing the eyeballs of countless people to explode. The 5 divine-level experts had always been seen as the top-notch battle prowess across the entire Earth. They were the Dark Sovereigns hiding behind the scenes. Although Fang Xinjian had sent the entire Earth's defenses headquarters flying with a single sword attack, there was still a debate as to who was stronger between him and the divine-level experts. Right now, Li Shuanghua, a veteran divine-level expert, was about to challenge Fang Xinjian. This caused countless people to feel excited, and they looked forward to the outcome of this battle. This was especially the case where Fang Xinjian and Li Shuanghua should both be from the Fang clan, yet they had gotten into a fight that would not end until one of them was dead. The feuds between the clans and the grudges between them attracted the curiosity of countless people. At the top floor of the Fang clan's building, Fang Xinjian's legs were circling as he floated in midair. Tyron stood where he was like a prostrating ferocious beast, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws at Fang Xinjian. It was as if he was continuing to increase his aura and power, as if he would be able to deal a fatal blow to Fang Xinjian at any moment. Indistinctly, it was as if the roars of a myriad of dragons could be heard in the air. The indistinct roars kept on rising and falling, as if there were a myriad of beasts charging over. In the entire Fang clan's building, countless people suddenly panicked and felt agitated. There was even a faint feeling of terror that kept on appearing in their hearts. It was as if there were some huge beasts hiding in the darkness, ready to pounce out and bite them at any moment. Compared to Tyron's rising aura, Fang Xinjian appeared very calm, not showing any signs of his aura at all. However, in reality, she was currently engaged in a contest of martial wills with Tyron. Their sword intents and fist intents kept on clashing and exchanging blows in void space. Wills against wills, concepts against concepts kept on clashing, causing cold sweat to break out incessantly on Tyron's head. Suddenly, he let out a furious bellow and took 3 steps back, saying, "I'm not fighting anymore. This sword intent of yours is too sharp. It's making my head hurt." Seeing how calm Fang Xinjian was, Tyron suddenly said, "Are you confident in this duel? I don't think that grandmother of yours is someone who would fight fairly. I'm 100% confident that I'll be able to win against her. However, if I want to sweep through the Federation, I'll still need greater power." Fang Xinjian put out his sword fingers, and a faint sword-shaped phantom image appeared around him. In Tyron's eyes, it exuded an extraordinary spiritual glow. Fang Xinjian continued, "Let's try combining our bodies first. If we succeed, it'll be able to increase our battle prowess greatly. After all, the only thing I can rapidly improve in is my sword art. Specialty seeds, physical particles, brain regeneration, and ether organs aren't things that can be done in a short period of time. Tyrant walked up with a twisted expression and said, "Don't use this move unless it's absolutely necessary." A few minutes later, their figures merged together, and Tyrant's body could be seen covering Fang Xinjian's body like layers of mercury. It was as if he had become another layer of skin for Fang Xinjian. Not only that, but he had even seeped into the heavenly abyss annihilation armor, directly linking up with Fang Xinjian's body. At the next moment, the auras of over 1,440 specialty seeds rose up from Fang Xinjian's body. Chapter 500. The fusion between Tyrant and Fang Xinjian was the result of Tyrant using his unique body structure to imitate the heavenly abyss annihilation armor, sticking onto Fang Xinjian's body like armor. There might not seem to be any difference, but Tyrant had engulfed the physical body of a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection. After merging into Fang Xinjian's body, Fang Xinjian was able to draw out the power from the 1,440 specialty seed. With this fusion, Fang Xinjian felt as if endless power was gushing out from void space, and the vital energy and blood in his body seethed like a great river. At this moment, Fang Xinjian felt as if his physical strength had increased by 10 or even 100 times. Endless power was gushing out from the many specialty seeds in his body, making him feel extremely exhilarated. With a light step, waves of air currents were generated in the air, and his entire person had already flown a distance of 10 kilometers. He took another step, and as his body cut through the air, thunderous sounds rang out, and he was already several thousand meters high in the sky. As expected, after we fused together, my physical strength increased crazily. It's even above that of ordinary demigods with 2 tiers of perfection. My physical strength has increased tremendously. Coupled with my original sword arts cultivation, my battle prowess on Earth has also become stronger. However, I still need to become even stronger. Thinking of his opponent this time around, surging negative emotions surged in Fang Xinjian's heart. In this battle, no matter what moves his opponent performed or what arrangements they made, he would not allow himself to fail. Just then, Tyrant said, "All right, let's remove the fusion first." Fang Xinjian asked, "Aren't you going to get used to it?" "To hell with getting used to it," Tyrant said angrily. "Try being together with a guy with your entire body sticking together. This won't do. I'm going to puke." Where are you going to puke in your current state?" "I don't know either, but I feel that I can't hold it in anymore." In the sky, Fang Xinjian looked at the ground under his feet and sank into deep thought. He was constantly condensing his specialty seeds, and he was also tempering his martial will without stopping for a single moment. However, if he wanted to improve his combat power qualitatively in the next month, it would be too late to use ordinary method. At this moment, Fang Xinjian's eyes suddenly flashed as he looked at a street dozens of kilometers away. On the street, dozens of desperados armed with machetes had forced a young man into a corner. The bearded leader shouted, "Kid, do you know who's protecting this street? How dare you ruin our business? If I don't take one of your arms today, we won't be able to live on this street anymore." The young man said angrily, "Who can't stop a bunch of thieves from stealing? You'd better think this through. Stealing will only result in arrest. If you dare to cut me today, all of you will go to jail." "Yo, kid, you're quite arrogant." "Kill him. Let's see if he still dares to be so arrogant. We'll take one of his arms and he'll know fear." In that instant, over 10 people charged forth, and the young man barely managed to fend off a few attacks. He was already covered in blood, and at the next moment, a machete came slashing down toward his face. It was clear that they wanted to kill him. Faced with this slash that was coming down toward his face, the young man's mind suddenly went blank. An unprecedented terror filled his mind, causing his body to turn numb. His muscles twitched, and the blood throughout his body flowed down at a rapid speed. However, at the next moment, the long saber broke, and Fang Xinjian was already standing before him. No one present had been able to see how Fang Xinjian had appeared before them. It was even more impossible for these minor characters at the bottom of the social hierarchy to know who Fang Xinjian was. The bearded man said in surprise and doubt, "And who are you? Are you going to protect this kid?" Fang Xinjian did not look at him. Instead, he turned to look at the young man, sensing the terror in the latter's heart. This is the fear of life and death. It might also be the greatest fear humans have. Looking at Fang Xinjian's appearance, the bearded man let out a cold laugh and said, "Another one who's putting on an act. Brothers, slash him to death." However, at the next moment, an eerie sword intent swept out, and the sounds of machetes dropping onto the ground rang out incessantly. All the machete-wielding men had turned into vegetables and were lying on the ground. The bearded man let out an agonizing cry as if he had seen a ghost. With a bang, he dropped to his knees. How could he not know that he had met with an expert? Say, "Sir, please spare my life." However, when he lifted his head to look, there was no sign of Fang Xinjian. Then, he felt a pain in his chest. He did not know when it had happened, but a large hole had appeared in his chest, and blood was gushing out like water. Sensing the fear the bearded man had before his death, Fang Xinjian came to a realization. If I wish to further temper my martial will, I'll probably have to rely on the fear of life and death. What was the most terrifying thing in the world? Different people might have different answers, but the most common answer would probably be death. That was the instincts of living creatures and humans. It was something that everyone was most unwilling to face, yet it was something that they had no choice but to face. In the following 1 month, Fang Xinjian started all sorts of attempts. There was only one goal: to get close to death and use the threat of death to force out his potential. He wanted to further temper his will and complete his 5th god-slaying sword. At the beginning, he put himself in danger. He plunged down from a height of 100,000 meters, smashing out a huge crater. He entered a trench that was several tens of thousands of meters deep into the sea. In the pitch-black deep sea, he faced the terrifying water pressure to temper his sword arts. He jumped into volcanic magma and went deep underground, watching as the rock strata engulfed and pressed down on him bit by bit. He soaked himself in liquid nitrogen, feeling his body temperature gradually decrease, and his heartbeat became increasingly slower. He did not inform anyone to assist him. It was because that would mean that he would lose the trial of the threat of death. After that, the various powers on Earth were no longer able to make him feel any danger. Therefore, he changed his method. He moved around the battlefield, watching as many bullets and cannonballs took away one life after another. "Who are you?" A soldier looked at Fang Xinjian, who was moving around the battlefield like a ghost, and bellowed, "Stop there! Don't move!" However, at the next moment, Fang Xinjian had already disappeared before his eyes, just like a real ghost. He came to the slums and saw many numb and despairing gazes. He saw many emaciated figures collapsing on the hospital beds, calmly facing death. An old man looked at Fang Xinjian, who had suddenly appeared before him in a daze. He saw that Fang Xinjian was floating slightly on the ground, with streams of sword light wrapping around him like wings. The old man could not help but ask, "Are you an angel?" Looking at the old man's final smile, Fang Xinjian dissipated into the air. Witnessing death, and observing death. During the last few days, the deathly aura on Fang Xinjian's body got increasingly stronger. He looked like a ghost that had come from the netherworld. He went to many hospitals and watched as lives continued to pass away every day. Fury, despair, terror, calmness, numbness. In the face of death, everyone displayed different attitude. On the last day before the arranged battle, Fang Xinjian came to a rundown hospital, found an empty hospital bed, and lay down on it. Over the past 1 month, he had tried many things, seen many things, and experienced many things. He also had a special understanding of death. However, he was still lacking a little. Fang Xinjian knew that it was time for him to take another step forward. After entering the hospital, it was as if no one could see him wherever he passed by. No one would ask him why he was lying on the hospital bed. Fang Xinjian lay on the hospital bed and slowly closed his eyes. This time around, he was going to face death personally. At the moment he closed his eyes, his breathing became increasingly softer, and his heartbeat became increasingly slower. In the end, it was as if he had completely lost his breath, turning into an ice-cold rock. Chapter 501. Ever since he had entered the second transition, Fang Xinjian's control over his physical body had gotten increasingly stronger. This was especially so after he had successively condensed specialty seeds, stimulated physical particles, and gained an extremely strong regenerative ability. His control over his physical body had reached an unprecedented pinnacle. Right now, by forcefully stopping his heartbeat and breathing, he was extremely close to death. And in the face of death, Fang Xinjian could only feel one thing: endless emptiness. Is death emptiness? There's nothing. Eternal darkness. Eternal loneliness. There's nothing. In fact, even consciousness is. Just as his consciousness started to dissipate, streams of sword intense suddenly shot out. Fang Xinjian's physical body was close to death, but he forced himself to stay awake by relying on the toughness of his martial will. This feeling was like a person who had run for 1,000,000 kilometers and yet was still forcing himself to continue running. It was impossible for a person to run for 1,000,000 kilometers, and it was even more impossible to continue running after running for 1,000,000 kilometers. Right now, Fang Xinjian was relying on his unbelievably tough sword intense to maintain his consciousness despite the fact that his heartbeat had stopped, his breathing had stopped, and his physical body was on the verge of death. I absolutely cannot die. I want to seek revenge. I want Li Shuanghua to kneel down and admit her wrongs. I want to find out about my mother. I want to understand what on earth is going on. I still want to attain the divine level. I want to see the greater heights of sword art. I must not die. Accompanied by the tug-of-war between death and consciousness, Fang Xinjian's sword intense started to grow at an unbelievable rate. He was using death to force himself to become stronger. As Fang Xinjian's sword intense continued to grow, the Heaven's Volition sword intent that had been hidden in his body all this while also started to tremble. This sword intent, which had been created by an unknown divine-level expert, seemed to finally be about to unleash its true powers when faced with Fang Xinjian's increasingly stronger cultivation. Just as Fang Xinjian was immersed in the depths of death and comprehending it, he was using the terror of life and death to temper his martial will so that he could attain further breakthroughs. Li Shuanghua's side was also constantly moving. The first thing he did was to shrink all of the overseas laboratories and then withdraw all of the Fang clan's cash, freezing up the Fang clan's cash flow. Fang Yuehe was extremely busy, and the Fang clan's operations had almost come to a complete standstill. If this was just to let the Fang family members re-recognize Li Shuanghua's control over the Fang family, then what Li Shuanghua did next was to threaten them with force. At the end of February 2037, a giant mushroom cloud rose in the desert northwest of Xian. The blazing light almost illuminated the sky within a radius of several hundred kilometers. Chaotic electromagnetic waves filled the sky above the entire Earth, announcing the release of mankind's most powerful force. In the center of the mushroom cloud, within the death domain where light and heat interweaved, a figure stepped out. In the launch site several tens of kilometers away, the Thunder Monarch's brows were tightly knitted together. Beside him, an adjutant exclaimed, "She's out! She's out!" She actually withstood a 50-megaton warhead. Hurry up and check her physical condition. Where's the rescue team? Hurry up and go up. No, the temperature is too high. I can't go up at all. The magnetic field is in a mess. Our detectors have all failed. She seems to be coming over. There's an object approaching at high speed. At the next moment, the ground that was 10 meters thick above the launch site was torn apart, and Li Shuanghua, who was charred black, appeared in the sky. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that her hair, skin, muscles, and other parts of her body were all regrowing. She seemed to have become younger and more delicate. Looking at the terrified crowd, Li Shuanghua said calmly, "Get me a coat." The Thunder Monarch looked at Li Shuanghua with a grim countenance and said, "You've attained a breakthrough?" Li Shuanghua said calmly, "From today onward, I'm the strongest on earth." When she said this, her tone was calm, but it was as if it was a matter of course. It was as if she was saying something common sense. However, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. "Thankfully, I managed to get in contact with the first prince half a year ago. Fang Qian has also sent over the ancient path of hell's research information. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to successfully imitate a knight's power and achieve the final breakthrough." The green-robed Magic Prince faction was most proficient in imitating and integrating all abilities. The Thunder Monarch's countenance turned even more grim, but he was unable to say anything. Nuclear weapons had always been mankind's ultimate weapons. Even divine-level experts had never had a record of going up against nuclear weapons head-on. Right now, Li Shuanghua had attained another breakthrough in her cultivation. To think that she was able to use her physical strength to go up against a nuclear weapon with a yield of 50 megatons. This meant that there were no longer any weapons on Earth that could harm her. If Fang Xinjian's previous performance had made everyone want to kill him by all means possible, slaying this retired emperor who had been suppressing them, then the power that Li Shuanghua displayed now made the Federation's upper echelon feel helpless. They were like gods who could not summon any will to resist. The difference between an retired emperor and a god was naturally huge. Within a few days, the news of Li Shuanghua going up against a nuclear weapon with a yield of 50 megatons with her physical body spread out. The various influences were in an uproar, and a large number of Fang clan's members once again sought refuge with Li Shuanghua. Countless countries and influences expressed their goodwill towards Li Shuanghua. Li Shuanghua's limelight immediately overshadowed that of the remaining 4 divine-level experts and Fang Xinjian. There were even some busybodies who suggested that Li Shuanghua was now the number 1 in the world. As the date of the duel drew closer, Li Shuanghua's reputation grew increasingly great. Later on, she paid a visit to several tens of great clans and organizations on Earth. With her terrifying physical strength, she connected all these great influences together and almost became the leader of the 5 divine-level experts. She then received an audience with Xian Country's president and White Eagle Country's president. Her reputation was so great that she was like the sun in the sky, almost becoming a legend. In the entire Federation, her words were practically of enormous weight. The title of number 1 in the world spread like wildfire. On the other hand, Fang Yuehe was only left with a few people. Even Fang Xinjian had gone missing for many days, with no traces of him to be found. On the day of the duel, Fang Yuehe had just gotten off the plane when he sensed the omnipresent gazes looking at him. He lifted his head and saw that the entire airport was filled with people. This duel had attracted too many people's gazes, and as Fang Yuehe was on Fang Xinjian's side, he was the target of countless people's gazes. However, most of these gazes were filled with mockery, pity, and gloating. Ever since the news of Li Shuanghua's participation in the nuclear bomb experiment spread out, Fang Yuehe had gradually gotten used to such gazes. That very night, his hair had even turned white, and his gaze no longer had the confidence and arrogance he had in the past. There was only an endless sense of loss, not knowing what he should do next. Chapter 502. A nuclear bomb with a yield of 50 megatons was one of the highest-grade nuclear bombs that could be chosen in the current testing situation. It was equivalent to 1% of the power of the sun. One shot was enough to destroy the entire demonic city, turning everything within a 15-kilometer radius into ashes and a 30-kilometer radius into ruins. The mushroom cloud produced by the explosion was 40 kilometers wide and 60 kilometers high, 7 times higher than Mount Everest. The hot air it produced could inflict level 3 burns on people 170 kilometers away. The flash produced by the explosion can cause burns and even cataracts and blindness to witnesses 200 kilometers away. The hurricane he produced had a pressure of 100 kilograms per square meter and could blow 1,000 kilometers. Because of this explosion, the Eurasian continent was pushed to the south by 9 millimeters. One had to know that the nuclear bombs that were commonly used in intercontinental missiles only had a yield of about 500,000 to 1 million tons. A nuclear bomb with a yield of 50 megatons could destroy any target on Earth. Such an ultimate weapon was blocked by Li Shuanghua just like that, and at the very center of the explosion. At the thought of this, Fang Yuehe felt a chill run down his spine. He could not think of any other way to kill Li Shuanghua. Obviously, the others thought the same. Therefore, right now, Fang Yuehe, who had rushed over to watch the battle, was alone. He looked extremely miserable, completely different from how he had been a month ago when he was surrounded by people. Even until the day of the duel, he still hadn't contacted Fang Xinjian, so he hadn't slept more than 2 hours for the past 3 days. There were all kinds of rumors in the outside world. Some said that Fang Xinjian had escaped, some said that he had apologized to Li Shuanghua, and some even said that he could not bear the pressure and committed suicide. In short, there was nothing good to say. As Fang Yuehe walked out of the airport, a row of people suddenly blocked his way. It was the Fang clan's third son, Fang Yueming. Right now, he was seated in a wheelchair with his head tilted to one side. His entire body was covered in bandages, and his eyes were filled with a morbid hatred. Pushing the wheelchair behind him was Hua Mimi, Fang Yueming's wife, who had been crippled by Fang Xinjian. She was looking at Fang Yuehe with a mocking gaze. Some time ago, she was picked up by Li Shuanghua, but no one dared to stop her. Looking at Fang Xinjian's astonished gaze, Fang Yueming gritted his teeth and said, "Second brother, you didn't expect this, right? I'm still alive?" Fang Yuehe let out a breath and said, "Third brother, it's good that you're alive." "As long as I'm alive? Do I look alive to you?" Fang Yueming grinned and said, "You think that you can become the clan head, but you didn't expect that Fang Xinjian is completely unreliable, right? How does it feel to climb to the top of the clouds, only to be pulled down again?" Hua Mimi also said, "Second uncle, you went astray this time and angered the old lady. I think you'd better think about how to appease her when the time comes." With that, the two of them laughed out loud and left, leaving behind a desolate Fang Yueming, who was filled with terror. He sighed and continued to walk towards the location of the duel. No matter what, with Li Shuanghua's current power, he had nowhere to run. He thought to himself that no matter what, he was still Li Shuanghua's son. At most, he would be banished from the core of the family. It was impossible to kill him. By the time he arrived at the center of the Sahara Desert, Li Shuanghua was already standing on a sand dune with her eyes closed. She stood there with her arms folded across her chest. There was not the slightest breeze within a radius of 1 kilometer, and there was not a single speck of dust flying in the air. Even the temperature did not seem to change. The countless spectators were basically all standing several tens of kilometers away from Li Shuanghua. The destructive prowess of a divine-level expert was far too great. Even though many of the spectators were experts, no one was willing to get close to the battlefield. They were basically using their special abilities, telescopes, detectors, or satellites to observe this duel from afar. After Fang Yuehe arrived at the battlefield, he found a random place to stay. He did not dare to meet his mother. One reason was that Li Shuanghua had been very strict since young, and her upbringing was extremely strict. This caused Fang Yuehe to be extremely fearful of his mother since young. Another reason was that ever since Li Shuanghua was acclaimed as the strongest expert on Earth, the #1 expert in the world, she had established connections with all the great clans and organizations on Earth. She had also received the recognition of the 5 great countries in the world, and her reputation had reached an unbelievable level. Just as Fang Yuehe was thinking about these, he heard an extremely imposing voice ringing out from the horizon. It was seething like the might of the heavens. "Unfilial son, since you're here, why aren't you kowtowing and admitting your mistakes?" Fang Yuehe's countenance changed. At the next moment, he felt a majestic, seemingly endless, yet omnipresent power extending out from void space. With a tug, it traversed a distance of over 10 kilometers and pulled him right before Li Shuanghua. At the next moment, an intense pain came from his knee, and Fang Yuehe dropped to his knees. Fang Yuehe's eyes immediately turned bloodshot as he knelt down before so many experts on Earth. He said, "Mother, must you do something like this before so many people?" "Humph." Li Shuanghua let out a cold snort, not caring about Fang Yuehe's fury at all. She said coldly, "Unfilial son, you colluded with that vile spawn and even wanted to snatch away the Fang clan's assets. You still have the cheek to come here today?" At this moment, Fang Yuehe seemed to have thrown caution to the wind and did not care about Li Shuanghua's might at all. He said, "Mother, I'm also your son. Do you only have eyes for third brother? What's wrong with me wanting to take control of the Fang clan? That's because you don't know your own limitations. Xingqian's talent will surpass mine in the future and bring the Fang clan to greater heights. Since that's the case, you should put away your petty thoughts and focus on opening up a path for him in the future. Who would have thought that you're so stupid that you can't be saved, to be together with that vile spawn?" Li Shuanghua said in disdain, "That vile spawn has become arrogant and conceited just because of a small fortuitous encounter. Do you really think that he'll be able to succeed? You're really short-sighted. Just based on this point alone, the Fang clan can't be handed over to you." Fang Yuehe felt increasingly indignant. He wanted to stand up and open his mouth to speak again, but he felt waves of great power gushing toward him from void space. His entire body was completely suppressed by the will of a divine-level expert, and he could not move at all. He could not even speak a single word. This feeling made Fang Yuehe feel extremely aggrieved. Li Shuanghua said, "Today you can just kneel here and reflect on your actions. After I've dealt with that vile spawn, you can follow me back to Demonic City. From today onward, don't bother about the clan's matters." After hearing Li Shuanghua's words, the courage that Fang Yuehe had just mustered up seemed to have dissipated in an instant. It was as if all of his spirit, qi, and spirit had been sucked out in that instant, and his eyes were filled with despair and perplexity. He knew that from today onward, he would probably only be able to eat and wait for death. He would no longer have any fate with the authority of the clan. Simultaneously, in a group over 10 kilometers away, Tyrant had taken the form of a Caucasian man and was hiding there. He frowned. "Damn, this old woman seems to have become even more powerful. I wonder if Xinjiang will be able to fend her off." Countless people were looking forward to this world-shaking battle. There were not only people who had come to watch the battle, but there were also countless cameras shining in Li Shuanghua's direction, carrying out a live broadcast across the internet. The spy satellites of a few countries kept on scanning the area, reporting the situation to their superiors at all times. However, from morning to noon, and from noon to night, Fang Xinjiang did not appear at all. Everyone's expressions became increasingly impatient. Could it be that Fang Xinjiang has escaped? If I were him, I wouldn't dare to come either. This coward. He's fooled the entire world. Just as there were more and more complaints and all sorts of people thought that Fang Xinjiang had stood him up, A loud and clear cry of a baby rang out in the hospital ward. Fang Xinjian's eyes opened abruptly. The end of life is death, and the end of death is life. Chapter 503. After his physical body had been dead for almost 1 day and 1 night, when Fang Xinjian was woken up by the cries of an infant, his consciousness awakened from a state of chaos. His heart started to beat once again, his blood started to flow once again, his lungs started to breathe, and his brain started to work again bit by bit. At this moment, Fang Xinjian suddenly had an extremely deep understanding of death. In his eyes, death seemed to no longer be terrifying. Simultaneously, the Heaven's Volition sword intent in his mind also became completely active, turning into a black sword edge that encompassed his entire body. Ever since he had obtained the Heaven's Volition sword intent, Fang Xinjian knew that as his cultivation grew, he would be able to unleash more and more of the Heaven's Volition sword intent's powers. This time around, when he had faked his death to train, the Heaven's Volition sword intent had gone through even more changes. Heaven's Volition, the survival of the fittest. Right now, Fang Xinjian had an even deeper understanding of the Heaven's Volition sword intent. He knew that the unique aspect of the Heaven's Volition sword intent was that it could continue to grow with time. As long as he continued to absorb new sword techniques and sword theories, he would be able to continue to adapt, evolve, and become increasingly stronger. Right now, as Fang Xinjian's comprehension of death and the tempering of his martial will, the Heaven's Volition sword intent had also evolved once. It had turned into a black sword edge that was filled with the aura of death, loneliness, and emptiness. Fang Xinjian believed that if he were to activate the Heaven's Volition sword intent now, its prowess would no longer be the same as before. As for the real reason why Fang Xinjian was cultivating in the face of death, the fifth god-slaying sword. Death was the end of a person's time. The consciousness of a dead person would be equivalent to jumping out from the river of time. They would no longer be able to affect history, and history would no longer be able to affect them either. It would only be when they returned to this world that they would once again enter the river of time. After integrating the profoundness of infiltrating void, light pursuit, and all-conquering, as well as using his comprehension of life and death and time as the framework, Fang Xinjian had finally succeeded in cultivating the fifth god-slaying sword. The instant of life and death. All the changes between life and death, as well as the process of entering and leaving the river of time, are all in that instant. This sword will be called instant. A black sword intent surged out from Fang Xinjian's body. As this power spread out, the birds in the sky froze in midair, the rays of the sun became distorted, the clouds became still, and the air turned into a stagnant barrier. It was as if the entire world had come to a standstill. When the black blade slashed past Fang Xinjian, the wall in front of him was completely torn apart. The fifth god-slaying sword could insert a new sword in time. When this sword slashed out, it was as if time had stopped. After this sword slashed out, time flowed again. Or rather, it could be said that he had inserted a sword into the river of time that did not originally exist. Naturally, during this process, Fang Xinjian could only unleash a single slash. He could not do anything else. Moreover, this slash could only be unleashed within a 100-meter radius. The instant sword truly came from nowhere and left without a reason. It was a sword that was executed in an impossible situation. It was also a sword that could not be dodged or defended against. After completing this sword attack, Fang Xinjian's expression was one of extreme elation and satisfaction. This sword attack relied purely on his sword arts cultivation, which meant that his sword arts cultivation had reached a certain pinnacle. If he were to activate the Heaven's Volition sword intent and then perform the instant sword attack, the prowess would definitely be even more terrifying. The black sword intent on his body disappeared with a flash, and with a single step, Fang Xinjian appeared before a nurse. The nurse was about to call for a doctor when she felt her mind sink. She said in a daze, "It's 11:50 p.m. on the 1st of March. Does this mean that I'm late?" At the thought of this, Fang Xinjian disappeared once again with a flash. Fang Xinjian soared into the air, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived at the stratosphere. After this 1 month of tough cultivation, not only had his martial will and sword arts cultivation improved tremendously, his other aspects had also improved tremendously. Both his specialty seeds and waves had improved tremendously, and the prodigious astral divine powers waves had already reached level 9. His mental cultivation method, universal sword dominance lunisolar, was seething. Fang Xinjian could sense that as he completely defeated Li Shuanghua this time around, the hatred in his heart would be released, and his mental cultivation method would improve tremendously. Right now, his attributes had become: name, Fang Xinjian, age, 18, occupation, heavenly sword sovereign level, 29 strength, 206 plus 19 agility, 311 plus 19 reaction, 216 endurance, 197 flexibility, 196 ether synchronization rate. 100%. The attributes above come into effect once the prodigious astral divine powers waves is activated. Due to perfect muscles, plus 19 in strength and agility, 10% of the endurance attribute techniques. Boundaries negation, level 44 God-slaying swords, level 12 ether divine art, white bone divine weapon, heaven's volition sword intent internal specialties, 260 external specialties, 8 waves. Level 9 prodigious astral divine powers waves mental cultivation method. Level 8 universal sword dominance lunisolar. Fang Xinjian's body cut across the cloud layers at high speed. Moving at a speed that was several tens of times that of supersonic speed, he arrived in the sky above the battlefield within a few minutes. Right now, on the battlefield in the Sahara Desert, countless people had waited for over 10 hours and seemed to be getting impatient. There were even people who had started to pack up, planning to leave. How boring! To think that Fang Xinjian backed off. What a joke! Li Shuanghua can even withstand a nuclear missile. Who on earth would be able to take a beating from her? Sigh, I had thought that there would be a battle of the century. I wonder where Fang Xinjian is hiding. Just then, someone pointed toward the eastern horizon and said, "Look! What's that? Is that Fang Xinjian?" Countless people gasped as they looked toward the eastern sky. They saw a long black line piercing through the sky. Wherever it passed by, the cloud layers would be split into two, turning into streams of air currents that gushed out in both directions. Just as everyone noticed this abnormality, a human figure was already standing several hundred meters above Li Shuanghua's head. At the next moment, Fang Xinjian's voice brought along a series of whirlwinds that instantly spread out to a range of 10 lis. It was as if 100,000 thunderbolts had exploded in the sky. Li Shuanghua, you probably didn't expect that there would be a day where I would stand before you and defeat you, right? Li Shuanghua let out a cold laugh and stood up. She looked at Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky, and said, "Vile spawn, do you think that you'll be able to fight against me just because you've comprehended some insignificant sword techniques?" Fang Xinjian's gaze was indifferent as he looked at Li Shuanghua. At the next moment, an extremely heavy will that was filled with an aura of death descended from the sky, smashing onto Li Shuanghua's body and colliding with her martial will. At this moment, Li Shuanghua's countenance changed. As their martial wills collided, she felt an extremely heavy feeling, and there was even a threat of death. At this moment, she understood that she was not the only one who had improved. Fang Xinjian's improvement was even more terrifying. Chapter 504. Fang Xinjian continued, "Li Shuanghua, as long as you're willing to kneel down and apologize to my mother before the world, I'll let you off." Fang Xinjian spoke calmly, but with Li Shuanghua's character, how could she possibly agree to it? Not only did she not agree to it, but fury flashed in her eyes. Your mother doesn't follow the ways of a woman and has lost her morals. Moreover, she's my daughter, and I was the one who gave her her life. Her body, hair, and skin were given to her by her parent. It's only right and proper for me to take her life. What right does she have to accept my kneeling?" Li Shuanghua let out an explosive bellow and said, "Vile spawn! Get down here!" With this thunderous bellow, a martial will that was like a green tempest swept out wildly toward the sky. Wherever it passed by, the atmosphere would be compressed into a vacuum, and a power that could destroy a mountain collided fiercely against Fang Xinjian's body. However, it collided fiercely against the pitch-black heaven's volition sword intent on Fang Xinjian's body. Fang Xinjian's sword intent had improved, and the heaven's volition sword intent had evolved. Although it still required potential points to activate, it would now take the initiative to protect Fang Xinjian. Crackling sounds of explosions rang out incessantly. It was the sound of the surrounding air being compressed by the two gushes of martial will. Facing this attack from Li Shuanghua's martial will, the Heaven's Volition sword intent took the initiative to protect Fang Xinjian, allowing him to withstand it and remain as steady as Mount Tai. However, Li Shuanghua's attack was not that simple. The explosive bellow was just the beginning. With that explosive bellow, she opened up her 5 fingers and grabbed fiercely at void space. The air within a range of 10 lis seemed as if it had encountered an absolute sovereign, or as if a black hole had suddenly appeared in space. Endless air gushed out wildly toward Li Shuanghua's palm, and in the blink of an eye, it had been compressed into a pure white sphere. Concurrently, her other hand struck out in the direction of Fang Xinjian's location across space. Green light flashed explosively, unleashing a prowess that was even stronger than the explosive bellow from earlier. It clashed against the Heaven's Volition sword intent on Fang Xinjian's body, releasing a deafening sound that was like the morning bell and evening drum, ringing out in all directions. This collision caused Fang Xinjian's body to sway slightly and his expression to change. He was still unaware that Li Shuanghua's cultivation had improved tremendously over the past month after combining the cultivation materials from the ancient path of hell. After 2 consecutive moves, the extremely compressed air in Li Shuanghua's palm had already turned from transparent to white, from white to gray, and from gray to pitch black. This was because as the wind was compressed, countless amounts of water vapor and dust condensed within it. This move was Li Shuanghua's ultimate move in the past, the 9 heavens wind thunder tribulation. It was said that this move could flatten an area of 10 li. However, this was still not enough. As the 9 heavens wind thunder tribulation was completed, waves of auras of sulfur and lava started to appear on Li Shuanghua's body. It was the aura of hell. She held the 9 heavens wind thunder tribulation in one hand while streams of demonic green flames rose from her other hand. They brought with them the aura of sulfur and lava, and also emitted an aura as if hell had descended and the mortal world had fallen. This was another move that Li Shuanghua had invented after imitating and integrating the powers of the ancient path of hell, the 9 earthly flaming air calamity. On one hand was a sovereign who ruled over the atmosphere and controlled strong gales. On the other hand was a demon who descended from hell and fell from the mortal world. Right now, Li Shuanghua's aura had reached an extreme. Under the guidance of a tremendous force, the sand in the surroundings started to fly up into the sky. The people who were watching the battle from several kilometers or over 10 kilometers away were all astonished. It was because they realized that despite being so far away, they were still affected by Li Shuanghua's martial will. Countless people dropped to their knees, their countenances pale. It was as if they had seen the most bloody and terrifying scene in hell. The Thunder Monarch, who was hiding in the dark, wore a complicated expression. What a powerful move! Where did she learn it from? I can sense that once the 2 gushes of powers in her hands explode at the same time, they'll be able to produce an extremely terrifying destructive prowess. Next to him, the despot, who was over 5 meters tall, wore a grim countenance. He had always been at odds with the Fang clan. Now that he saw how powerful Li Shuanghua was, it was easy to imagine how bad his mood was. He said in a deep voice, "This isn't the martial arts that she had learned in the past. One of them is as deep and ancient as hell, and it has an aura of the netherworld. This feeling is probably not an original martial art from Earth." Right now, Li Shuanghua wore a proud expression. The two different powers of the atmosphere and hell were combined together. The three special effects of wind, fire, and thunder gathered together, forming a tempest that could destroy everything. At this moment, Li Shuanghua's powers had erupted to a pinnacle. She felt as if her powers could crush the entire earth. However, Fang Xinjian, who was in the sky, appeared indifferent. He merely asked coldly, "Are you done with your preparations?" Li Shuanghua's eyes narrowed. She had not expected that the reason why Fang Xinjian had been standing there and not making a move from the beginning to the end was because he wanted her to continue unleashing her powers to the greatest extent. "He wants to defeat me when I'm at my strongest?" Li Shuanghua had not thought wrongly. Fang Xinjian wanted to defeat Li Shuanghua at the moment when her aura and powers reached their pinnacle, completely destroying her will. At the thought of this, the fury in her eyes grew even more intense. With a move of her hands, the 9 heavenly wind thunder calamity and the 9 earthly flaming air disaster clashed together fiercely, turning into a tempest that gushed out toward Fang Xinjian. This tempest seemed to have come from hell itself. Wherever it passed by, all the air molecules would be heated up into a plasma state. There was also a feeling that hell had descended, and the mortal world would once again turn into the hellish environment of ancient times. It was as if this gust of tempest from hell was going to blow by. Everything was going to return to the situation several billion years ago when Earth was still a pot of chemical soup. All life no longer existed. This intent that could take away all life was far too powerful. When it suddenly appeared, within a range of over 10 kilometers, countless people who were watching the battle gasped. Some spewed out blood and fell to the ground, some wore expressions of terror, and some even fainted. At this moment, the power that Li Shuanghua displayed was far too strong. Both her pure physical destructive prowess and her mental destructive prowess had reached an extreme. Fang Yuehe, who was the closest to her, felt especially terrified. He felt like he was a small boat amidst a raging tempest, about to be smashed into smithereens at any moment. The pressure on Fang Xinjian, who was the first to bear the brunt of the attack, was even greater. The black heaven's volition sword intent turned into many sword edges, encompassing his body. However, under Li Shuanghua's attacks, the black sword edges melted away rapidly, as if they would completely dissipate at any moment. However, just as everyone thought that Fang Xinjian was going to be defeated, Fang Xinjian finally made his move. The 5th god-slaying sword, instant, was activated. No one saw what Fang Xinjian's sword move looked like, no one saw where Fang Xinjian's sword attack came from, and no one saw where Fang Xinjian's sword attack ended. There was neither a beginning nor an end. It was as if an extra second had been inserted into the video. In the end, everyone could only see a trace of sword mark split open on Li Shuanghua's neck, and a look of astonishment appeared in Li Shuanghua's eyes. "You!" Before she could finish her words, Li Shuanghua's head soared into the sky, and she had turned into a headless female corpse. Chapter 505. Seeing the scene of Li Shuanghua being beheaded with a single sword attack, everyone present was extremely astonished. They had not expected that Li Shuanghua, who could withstand a nuclear weapon with a yield of 50 megatons, would be killed with a single sword attack just like that. However, just as everyone thought that Li Shuanghua would die just like that, green light flashed incessantly on her body. In the blink of an eye, it once again formed her body. Her entire physical body had been completely reconstructed once again. Violent martial will struck Fang Xinjian's body with a boom, catching Fang Xinjian off guard and sending him flying over 10 kilometers away. Li Shuanghua's violent will was also accompanied by it. Vile spawn, do you think that you can win against me just like that? My martial will has long since stepped into the second realm. Other than materializing my will and being able to interfere with the physical world, I can also turn my will into a physical body and reconstruct my own physical body at will. As long as my will doesn't die, my physical body will never die. At the next moment, green light flashed explosively in Li Shuanghua's eyes, and countless explosions took place on the mountain that was over 10 kilometers away, blasting Fang Xinjian and the entire mountain into ruins. Seeing this astonishing scene, everyone present was once again astonished, especially the Thunder Monarch and Despot, who were also divine-level experts. The Thunder Monarch was extremely astonished. Materializing one's will allows one to break through the restraints of the physical body and mind, attaining the divine level. However, we haven't been able to figure out how to improve after that. How on earth did Li Shuanghua improve further? The despot, who was like a huge black gorilla, stomped on the metal ground, causing it to crack. He gritted his teeth and thought hatefully, damn it, turning the will into a physical body? As long as the will doesn't die, the physical body won't die? What kind of joke is this? To think that after one's will is materialized, it can still be raised to such a level? It's no wonder that she can fend off a nuclear missile with a yield of 50 megatons. Green flashes encompassed the entire ground, drowning Fang Xinjian's body completely. Violent pressure gathered on every inch of Fang Xinjian's skin, and the Heavenly Abyss Annihilation armor let out a series of cries as if it was going to be turned into scrap at any moment due to the high temperature and explosion. However, just then, a will that was filled with killing intent, killing aura, and death came gushing over once again. Is this what you're relying on? Is this your trump card? Li Shuanghua. Too insignificant. At the next moment, the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent was activated. Potential points disappeared at the rate of 100,000 points per second. 2 white bone swords had appeared in Fang Xinjian's hands at some point in time. The sword in his right hand slashed out. With the reinforcement from the Heaven's Volition Sword Intent, how powerful would the fourth god-slaying sword, all-conquering, be? Wherever the longsword passed by, the cloud layers, which were over 100 kilometers in length, would be split into 2. The sunlight that shone down from the sky was completely cut off, and the green martial will was also split apart before Fang Xinjian like the sea that had been split apart. It was as if nothing in the world would be able to stop the sword. Fang Xinjian dashed forward and was about to appear before Li Shuanghua. Li Shuanghua let out a wild roar, and a green light burst out, smashing towards Fang Xinjian crazily. Concurrently, the 9 heavenly wind thunder calamity and 9 earthly flaming air disaster were activated simultaneously, turning into a hellish tempest that gushed out toward Fang Xinjian. However, it was still useless. Fang Xinjian's longsword pierced out diagonally, and the green light, which encompassed a range of several kilometers, was slashed into 2 with a swoosh. A hellish passageway was also slashed out from the hellish tempest. What? Li Shuanghua stared at this scene, as if unable to accept that her attack had been slashed into 2 by Fang Xinjian. At the next moment, Fang Xinjian had already appeared before Li Shuanghua. The 5th god-slaying sword, Instant, was activated, and Li Shuanghua was once again slashed into 2 at the waist. Li Shuanghua had just reassembled her body when her head was slashed into minced meat. Fang Xinjian stood before Li Shuanghua, activating Instant again and again. Streams of sword marks exploded before Li Shuanghua, killing her body time and time again. Li Shuanghua let out an enraged bellow and charged out while flashing with green light. However, she was slashed into minced meat by Instant and exploded in midair. She reassembled her body once again and launched an attack with her martial will. Countless wind and thunderbolts descended from the sky, but Fang Xinjian glared at her and activated the light pursuit sword ripples. The wind and thunderbolts were shattered, and Li Shuanghua's head exploded from the several million light pursuit sword ripples. Ah! An ear-piercing scream rang out from void space, turning into waves of ultrasonic waves that could crush mountains and attacking Fang Xinjian. However, the speed of sound was still too slow for Fang Xinjian. Fang Xinjian swept out with his longsword, and the myriad of sound waves were shattered. Li Shuanghua's body, which had just been formed, exploded once again. In the sky, the green martial will seethed. However, this time around, Fang Xinjian did not even give her the chance to reassemble her body. The white bone longsword in his hand pierced out with a swoosh, appearing in the center of the green martial wheel like a flickering light and passing shadows. With this piercing attack, the Heaven's Volition sword intent turned into a black sword edge and exploded, piercing straight into the green martial will. Li Shuanghua's martial will, which was in midair, suddenly exploded and scattered. It was swept by the black sword intent into fragments. Li Shuanghua's martial will was unable to fend off the invasion of the Heaven's Volition sword intent and Fang Xinjian's sword technique. She was pushed back in midair, unable to put up any resistance. Many world-shaking and agonizing cries rang out incessantly in void space. However, as Fang Xinjian's sword intent swept out, the glow of the green martial will became increasingly faint, and its volume also became increasingly smaller. In the end, there was only a faint glow that was like that of a firefly. Fang Xinjian watched as Li Shuanghua reassembled her body. However, her vital energy and blood had already deteriorated to an extreme. Not only was she unable to move, but she could not even materialize her will. At the sight of this scene, the Thunder Monarch was astonished. Hang up and beat her up? To think that it's a hang up and beat her up? How can it be a hang up and beat her up? Why is it a hang up and beat her up? The despot's mouth was agape, almost unable to close up. He looked at Fang Xinjian and the immobile Li Shuanghua as if he was looking at aliens. As her martial will has improved once again and can even be turned into flesh and blood, Li Shuanghua can even use her physical body to fend off nuclear missiles and use her will to replenish her physical body. She has a body that can fend off a nuclear missile with a yield of 50 megatons. However, under Fang Xinjian's sword, she can't even stand up to a single blow? Damn it, it seems like this guy hasn't even gone all out yet. On the other side of the desert, Fang Yueming sat in a wheelchair while Hua Mimi stood behind it. The two of them stared at the screen before them. The screen was filled with smoke, explosions, and flames, but they were unable to see Fang Xinjian and Li Shuanghua's figures clearly. The two of them had had a large part of their cultivations crippled, and they were unable to see the situation on the battlefield by themselves. Fang Yueming's face was filled with hatred and exhilaration. He could not help but shout, hurry up and get to the bottom of this. I want to see how tragic that B**** ends up. However, at the next moment, after the smoke dissipated, Fang Xinjian and Li Shuanghua's figures finally appeared on the screen. However, what astonished everyone was that the person standing right now was Fang Xinjian, while Li Shuanghua was lying on the sand, not moving at all. She only glared at Fang Xinjian with a pair of vengeful eyes. Chapter 506. Looking down at Li Shuanghua, who had fallen to the ground, Fang Xinjian felt exhilarated like never before. The mental cultivation method in his mind continued to circulate rapidly, as if he would attain a breakthrough at any moment. Looking at Li Shuanghua's venomous gaze, Fang Xinjian said calmly, Li Shuanghua, are you still not willing to admit defeat? With Li Shuanghua's personality, how could a divine-level expert, an expert who had cultivated to such a level, possibly admit defeat so easily? Even if a sword or saber were to be placed on her neck, she would not admit defeat so easily. Vile spawn, you're a traitor and ungrateful. Even if you win by a small margin today, you'll definitely be guilty of many crimes in the future. You won't have a good ending. Fang Xinjian also knew that it was impossible for Li Shuanghua to admit defeat so easily. If she did not have that indomitable and unyielding will, she would not have been able to materialize her will and become a divine-level expert. Therefore, when Fang Xinjian heard this, he merely shook his head. Since you refuse to admit defeat and possess divine-level powers, there's no way I'll let you off so easily. With that, he pointed the bone sword at Li Shuanghua's forehead and said, I'll ask you one more time. If you are willing to admit your mistake and admit defeat to me, and if you are willing to kneel in front of my mother in the morning hall, I will let you go. If you're unwilling, then I'll cripple your cultivation first. Ha 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 ha, Li Shuanghua laughed out loud and said, Vile spawn, do you think that you can threaten me with such a small matter? If you want to cripple me, then so be it. But if you want me to admit defeat and kneel down before Fang Yueru, that rebellious daughter who has humiliated our clan, that's impossible. Moreover, do you think that you're invincible just because you've won against me? There's still the Federation and other divine-level experts on Earth. They won't let you do as you please. The Federation? Other divine-level experts? Fang Xinjian smiled. Ignoring Li Shuanghua, who could no longer move, he lifted his head and looked toward the west. At the next instant, his body disappeared abruptly and appeared over 10 kilometers away. He then plunged fiercely toward the ground. With a loud boom, as Fang Xinjian landed fiercely on the ground, endless yellow sand soared into the sky. It was as if several 10,000 kilograms of explosives had been ignited, scattering out in all directions. The people in the surroundings were either knocked unconscious or sent flying. Countless tents, tables, chairs, food, and drinks were overturned and sent flying several kilometers away. There were only 2 people left in the hall, which had been set up like that of an ancient emperor. One of them was the despot, who looked like a chimpanzee, sitting where he was, looking coldly at Fang Xinjian. Beside him, the silver-haired and silver-eyed Thunder Monarch let out a low bellow, and countless alloy armors flew over from all directions, assembling onto his body. As the divine-level expert from the Ford clan, who had the greatest technological prowess, the clan's sword. The Fang Xinjian's to the Ford. Not only did it have a built-in high-intelligence system, but each piece of the armor was also forged from many layers of special alloys. Even if he was at the bottom of the ocean, in outer space, or even on the moon, he would be able to move about freely without suffering any damage. It contained various weapons such as lasers, missiles, extremely powerful plasma beams, ultrasonic waves, ring-shaped lightning bolts, and so on. It had the destructive prowess of an entire modern mechanized army. As for the Thunder Monarch himself, he was a possessor of Yellow Faction Magic Prince. Different from the Magic Prince of the other colors, the Yellow Magic Prince emphasized a kind of evolution. All of its Black Magic and Magic Prince abilities were focused on incessantly stimulating the cultivator's body, allowing the cultivator to continuously evolve. This kind of evolution was very broad, and it was also an evolution that was unique to each person. The powers of any Yellow Faction Magic Prince warrior or yellow-robed mage would be different based on their mental state, experiences, and personality. This meant that as the powers of any Yellow Faction Magic Prince warrior or yellow-robed mage continued to evolve, the powers they grasped would be unique and different from the others. They might be similar, but they would definitely not be completely the same. The Thunder Monarch cultivated Yellow Faction Magic Prince, and what he kept on evolving was lightning-related abilities. Coupled with the high technological weapons that the Ford clan kept on developing, he possessed astonishing battle prowess. With Fang Xinjian's appearance, the trio's martial wills clashed wildly in the air, and countless thoughts intersected and communicated in that instant. Fang Xinjian, are you crazy? Are you going to fight against the 2 of us alone? The 2 of you better go all out. Otherwise, it would be a great pity for 2 divine-level experts to die under my sword. This lunatic. After a short exchange, Both the Thunder Monarch and the Despot knew that there was no way out for them when faced with Fang Xinjian's response. At the next moment, the Thunder Monarch's entire body flashed with electricity, and the alloy armor he wore was fully activated. Over 100 probes lit up simultaneously, and over 100 laser cannons shot out toward Fang Xinjian. The Thunder Monarch had turned his lightning-related abilities into laser beams and shot them out at full power. Just as the over 100 laser cannons landed on Fang Xinjian's body, the Despot, who was like King Kong, moved at the same time. Streams of black magic prints swelled up all over his body. Accompanied by the appearance of these black magic prints, his aura increased crazily, and a phantom image that was over 100 meters tall and looked exactly the same as him rose up behind him. Black faction magic prince and black-robed mages had always been considered to be the 3 factions among the 12 factions of black magic that possessed the strongest battle prowess in head-on battles, along with the gold faction and the silver faction. Black faction magic prince cultivators would not possess any other extraordinary abilities. The only ability they possessed was that they could engulf other life forms to strengthen their physical body and mental state without limit. Although they did not possess any other extraordinary abilities, with their terrifying physical body and mental state, their battle prowess was extremely terrifying. Simultaneously, due to the fact that they could engulf other life forms to increase their battle prowess, they usually improved very quickly. This was also the reason why black faction cultivators, like the Despot, loved to kill and were temperamental. The Despot suddenly erupted, and the muscles under his skin started to twist like many ancient huge dragons. Before the power from his punches had even landed on Fang Xinjian's body, the surrounding air had already been completely sucked dry. Even the ground under his feet had sunk by an entire meter. The Despot's strength attribute had already reached over 400 points. It was the first time Fang Xinjian had seen such a powerful physical body. Moreover, it was not just his physical body. The extremely massive phantom image behind the Despot, which was over 100 meters tall, was formed from his martial will. The number of phantom images was so great that even Li Shuanghua could not be compared to it. In that instant, both the Thunder Monarch and the Despot joined forces. The 2 divine-level experts had a deep understanding of how terrifying Fang Xinjian was. They went all out the moment they attacked, and the yellow and black magic prints swelled up at the same time. Over 100 beams of light blasted onto Fang Xinjian's body. Then within 0.001 seconds, the Despot's fists followed up, and the phantom image behind him also struck out from a distance. Violent martial will gushed forth like a spiritual tsunami, wanting to engulf Fang Xinjian's consciousness completely. Faced with such a terrifying siege, Fang Xinjian only unleashed one sword attack. The 5th God-slaying sword, instant. At the next moment, the alloy armor on the Thunder Monarch's chest, which could withstand several 10,000 tons of pressure, exploded abruptly. A hole was blasted through his chest, and he was sent flying out over 100 kilometers. Along the way, he sent the atmosphere and sand dunes flying, and he smashed through countless hills. Chapter 507. After sending the Thunder Monarch flying with a single sword attack, the Despot's fist had just come into contact with Fang Xinjian when the latter had already activated the infiltrating void and stepped into the spatial gap. However, the Despot's equally violent martial will came smashing down, and a terrifying spiritual tsunami came gushing forth, filling up every inch of the spatial gap. Endless amounts of information gushed forth, as if wanting to make Fang Xinjian's brain explode completely. However, faced with this terrifying attack, Fang Xinjian slashed out with his sword again unhurriedly, the 4th God-slaying sword, all-conquering. In terms of quantity, your martial will is more than the Thunder Monarch's and Li Shuanghua's combined. However, in terms of quality, it's just something you've gathered by engulfing the spiritual energy of countless people. A all-conquering slashed out from the spatial gaps, splitting the phantom image that was over 100 meters tall into two. The martial will, which was tremendous in quantity and was like a tsunami, was like butter that had encountered a kitchen knife before Fang Xinjian's sword attack. It was sliced into dust, leaving behind only a core mass of black light and a gush of martial will that truly belonged to the despot. Roar! The heavy mental blow caused the despot to let out a world-shaking and agonizing cry. Enraged, his muscles swelled up once again, and he turned into a black giant that was over 10 meters tall. He lowered his shoulders, lowered his elbows, and struck out with a punch. Power rose up from his feet, passing through his entire body. Moreover, with the addition of his muscles that were twisting like a tyrannosaurus, the power was magnified crazily. With a single punch, the mountains and rivers seemed to change in color. The clouds in the entire Sahara Desert were swept away, and the weather in Africa changed rapidly. A terrifying sandstorm swept across the entire desert. In a small city at the borders of the Sahara Desert, the originally clear sky instantly darkened. Countless pedestrians stopped in their tracks, looked at the sandstorm that was sweeping toward them, and cried out as they fled in all directions. In the next few tens of minutes, the entire city was drowned by the sandstorm. In Egypt, which was located in the north, all the airports were urgently halted. In the following week, a huge sandstorm wreaked havoc across the entire North Africa. However, this punch, which could cause a magnitude 7 or even 8 earthquake and affect the whole of North Africa, was directly split in front of Fang Xinjian. Starting from the surface of the fist, the despot's wrist, arm, elbow, and shoulder were sliced into two. The massive arm that was 5 meters tall and weighed tens of tons smashed into the ground like a building. With a wild roar, despot's other fist punched out once again. Amidst the stifled rumbles, Fang Xinjian could even sense that many atoms and molecules had been shattered. Streams of light radiations and explosions came smashing over, accompanied by the brutal fist. This was actually a phenomenon achieved with pure physical strength. Just how terrifying was this physical strength? It was a pity that it was still useless. The all-conquering sword swept out diagonally, and the despot's other arm, which was over 5 meters long and over 2 meters thick, was sent flying with a swoosh. It collided into the ground and sent sand flying up. The spectators in the surroundings started to retreat frantically. Compared to the battle between Li Shuanghua and Fang Xinjian, the despot, who had gone all out, was like a natural disaster creator. His unbridled fist force scattered out, creating a terrifying sandstorm and strong gales. "Run! The tornado is coming. Damn it, our car has flipped over. Where's the guide?" At the next moment, a sandstorm that was over 1,000 meters tall came gushing over like a tsunami. Everyone was stunned. "Quick! Run!" In the battlefield, over 1,000,000 light pursuit sword ripples gushed toward the despot like tidal waves. The latter was completely drowned for a whole second, and when he reappeared, the black skin all over his body had been peeled off. Only countless muscles and blood vessels could be seen, and he lay on the ground in a half-dead state. The despot bellowed furiously, "Fang Xinjian, you'll die a horrible death. Are you trying to start an all-out war with us?" Fang Xinjian did not reply and merely threw him an indifferent glance. The deathly sword intent struck the despot's head, and Fang Xinjian's voice rang out in his mind, "If you say another word, I'll kill your entire clan." The despot's face was flushed red, and he was so furious that his entire body was trembling. However, under that seemingly material deathly sword intent, he was unable to say a single word. It was because he knew that Fang Xinjian was not joking. If he were to say another word, Fang Xinjian would really kill his entire clan. After crippling the despot temporarily, Fang Xinjian's gaze absorbed countless light waves and looked toward the Thunder Monarch, who was several tens of kilometers away. Right now, the Thunder Monarch's broken alloy armor was emitting streams of plasma flames, and blue plasma was spurting out as if it was free. The Thunder Monarch flew toward the east like a meteor. In the time that Fang Xinjian had taken a glance, the distance between the Thunder Monarch and Fang Xinjian had already exceeded 60 kilometers, and he was still accelerating. If the despot was said to be a strength-type opponent, then the Thunder Monarch was an expert who specialized in ultra-long-range combat. Right now, the Thunder Monarch was planning to escape to Demonic City, to Miracle World. Faced with the Thunder Monarch, who was trying to escape, Fang Xinjian appeared behind Tyrant with a flash. After exchanging information for 0.1 seconds, Tyrant had already encompassed Fang Xinjian's body. In that instant, the auras from the 1,440 specialty seeds soared into the sky, and waves of physical strength seethed in his body like a great river. At the next moment, Fang Xinjian squatted down abruptly. With a loud boom, it was as if the sand under his feet had been slapped by a huge invisible palm, and the area within a range of 100 meters sunk by 2 meters. The power from Fang Xinjian's legs exploded like a bomb, and a myriad of sand soared into the sky, forming another sandstorm that extended out for several tens of kilometers. Fang Xinjian was like a rocket. No, he was dashing out at a speed that far surpassed that of a rocket. Under his extreme speed, everything in the world seemed to have come to a standstill. The flying birds froze, the sand and dust froze, and the air came smashing over like cement. Fang Xinjian stabbed out with his longsword, activating the all-conquering sword. The air before him was slashed apart, creating a vacuum passageway and destroying all air resistance. With each step Fang Xinjian took, the air would explode from his stomp, shaking up everything within 100 li. Streams of air currents gushed out in all directions. Some swept up endless sand, some destroyed mountains and rocks, and some lifted up the clear skies within a 10,000 li radius. Unleashing his full power, Fang Xinjian's speed instantly reached an extreme. With a slight pause, he had already dashed over 30 kilometers away. With a few more flashes, he appeared over 50 kilometers away. Right now, the Thunder Monarch's mind was completely filled with terror. Strong. Unrivaled. How can there be such a terrifying sword technique in this world? Thankfully, I managed to escape. I must leave Earth immediately. Only by escaping to Miracle World will I be able to make use of diabolic energy and shake off Fang Xinjian. The diabolic energy on Earth was too weak. It was only in Miracle World that Magic Prince warriors or mages would be able to make use of diabolic energy in battle. Just as the Thunder Monarch was thinking of this, alarm sounds rang out incessantly from the alloy armor. On the screen of the helmet on the electronic map, a red dot was catching up to him at an unimaginable speed. Chapter 508. The Thunder Monarch turned his head and saw a black dot suddenly appear in midair. He blinked, and that black dot turned into Fang Xinjian, appearing over 10 kilometers behind him. The Thunder Monarch let out an astonished cry, and over 100 laser beams shot out, hitting Fang Xinjian's body. Simultaneously, several tens of small-scale missiles shot out fiercely, smashing toward Fang Xinjian's head. However, Fang Xinjian's sword light slashed out horizontally. All of the laser beams had only heated up his body for less than 1/100th of a second when they were swept through by streams of sword light. They were split into two from the middle and reflected onto the ground, creating many huge ravines. Simultaneously, Fang Xinjian's body accelerated once again, and the 1,000,000 sword ripples swept out. All of the small-scale missiles were shattered, and he was now less than 100 meters away from the Thunder Monarch. The Thunder Monarch's countenance turned pale. However, he was a divine-level expert after all. Although he was terrified of Fang Xinjian's power, it did not affect his performance in the least in the battle. Scorching white light burst out from his body, and streams of ring-shaped lightning appeared, turning into plasma with a high temperature of several 100,000 degrees Celsius that encompassed his body. Layers of stacking plasma engulfed his body completely, and then it shrank abruptly. Then it sent out plasma spheres that smashed out toward Fang Xinjian, who was dashing toward him. At this moment, the destructive prowess that the Thunder Monarch displayed was comparable to the plasma cannons on the legendary interstellar battleship. Any of the plasma cannons sent out would be able to penetrate through any armor on Earth. The instantaneous destructive prowess within a single area could even be compared to that of a nuclear missile. Seeing the plasma spheres shooting out explosively toward him, Fang Xinjian slashed out again without even thinking, activating the light pursuit sword ripples. In an instant, over 1 million sword attacks struck out, destroying the plasma spheres and the plasma within them. However, this also caused Fang Xinjian's speed to be slightly slower, and the Thunder Monarch once again widened the distance between the two of them. The two of them chased and fled just like that. Wherever they passed by, there would be thunderous explosions, and streams of laser beams, sword ripples, and plasma cannons would scatter onto the ground. They destroyed countless mountains and vaporized many lakes. The two of them were simply too fast. In the blink of an eye, they had crossed the African continent and arrived at the Asian continent. Compared to the battle with the despot, the destructive prowess of each battle between Fang Xinjian and the Thunder Monarch was smaller. However, due to their high mobility, the area of effect they had was larger. They're here. They've crossed the border. In the middle of the Eurasian continent, the Air Force Command Center of a certain country was in chaos. Fire all the missiles and shoot down that Fang Xinjian for me. No, it's too fast. Our missiles can't catch up at all. Damn it, the aftermath of their attack destroyed the entire Essex Air Force Base. Where is he? Where are they now? They're gone. They've already passed through our country. On the Himalayas, 3 mountaineers were slowly climbing towards the peak. However, at the next moment, 2 black lines cut across the sky, appearing and then disappearing from their line of sight. Then, under the trio's astonished gazes, streams of thunder rumbled, and several hundred light pillars cut across the sky. Countless transparent and formless sword ripples slashed onto the mountain peak, and over 100 meters of Mount Everest's slopes were vaporized. One of the mountaineers looked at the incoming avalanche and bellowed, "Run!" At the foot of the mountain, countless people walked out from their cars, houses, and hotels. They looked at the doomsday-like scene with their eyes and mouths agape. They saw countless snowflakes being blasted into the sky, turning into a snowstorm driven by gusts of strong gales. Bringing along avalanches and explosions, it encompassed the entire Himalayas at an extremely rapid speed. They've crossed the border. Where are they? Northwest Province. No. Their speed is too fast. They've already reached the Central Province. What kind of joke is this? Where's the Skynet? Where's the anti-missile system? We can't catch up to them. In the Joint Command Center of Xian Country and the Earth's Federation, several hundred military officers were extremely busy. One of the commanders looked at the 2 light spots that were advancing rapidly on the map and mumbled, "Is this the true destructive prowess of a divine-level expert? To think that in less than a minute, they've crossed across the entire Eurasian continent, destroyed countless mountain ranges, cities and armies, and returned directly?" At this moment, an unprecedented feeling of dejection shrouded the hearts of everyone present. With such power, such mobility, and such destructive prowess, how were they supposed to make a move? Just then, an adjutant came up to the commander and said, "Sir, the Federation's president has already given permission for you to use nuclear missiles at the critical moment. We mustn't let Demonic City be destroyed in the hands of the 2 of them. We must stop them before they arrive." In the sky, 10,000 meters above the ground, in the blink of an eye, the Thunder Monarch and Fang Xinjian arrived in the central region of Xian Country. The 2 of them had exchanged blows for less than a minute, but the Thunder Monarch felt extremely exhausted. Regardless of whether it was laser cannons, guided missiles, plasma cannons, or even poison attacks and lightning strikes, all of them would be slashed apart by the lunatic before him with a single sword attack. The Thunder Monarch felt as if he was at the end of his rope. However, just then, 3 intercontinental ballistic missiles that were over 10 meters long flew over from the front. The speed of the intercontinental ballistic missiles was much slower than theirs. However, as they were facing the Thunder Monarch and Fang Xinjian, their relative speed was the same. Therefore, in the blink of an eye, they had already arrived next to the two of them. Boom! In just a few microseconds, the atmospheric pressure at the center of the nuclear explosion reached several billion times stronger than before. All the atoms in the air were stripped of their electrons, forming high-temperature and high-pressure plasma. X-rays, beta rays, alpha rays, and all sorts of light radiations burst out explosively. A fireball with a diameter of over 50 kilometers was born in the sky, just like a second sun in the sky. At this moment, within a range of over 1,000 kilometers, almost everyone in Xian country could witness this bright light in the sky. At the center of the shock waves, Tyrant, who was outside Fang Xinjian's skin, received the first round of impact. Then, like an onion that had its layers peeled off, over 70% of Tyrant's body tissues were vaporized completely within a short thousandth of a second. The high-temperature and high-pressure plasma shock waves, which were mixed with all sorts of light radiations, struck Fang Xinjian's body. At this moment, Fang Xinjian only felt that every bit of flesh and blood throughout his body was dying, and every single cell was withering. If he did not put up any resistance, his physical body would truly turn into dust in the next hundredth of a second. However, as a physical structure, the physical body was dying. The physical particles that formed the physical structure, which were even smaller than cells, were going through a different metamorphosis at this moment. Fang Xinjian relied on his martial will, which was so powerful that he could survive for 1 day and 1 night even after his physical body died. In the process of his physical body ceaselessly dying out, he sensed the changes in the 1.08 billion physical particles in his body. He could sense that the physical particles in his body were exploding one after another under the impact of the nuclear explosion. They were like candles, and countless candles lit up under the impact of the nuclear explosion in his originally dim body. It was as if countless worlds were shattering in Fang Xinjian's body. Under the impact of the nuclear explosion, over 100 physical particles stirred. Chapter 509. This feeling? The physical particles in my body are incessantly being stimulated? However, sensing that his physical body and brain were about to break down, Fang Xinjian did not linger on this feeling any longer. He swung his long sword repeatedly, sweeping away the high-temperature shock waves in the surroundings. Then he darted into the spatial gaps with the Thunder Monarch. In Demonic City, in the joint command center of Xian country and the Federation, everyone was extremely nervous. The Zhongxi province has sensed an intense tremor. All electronic communications in the entire Zhongyuan province have been destroyed. We probably won't be able to recover within 48 hours. There's a fire in the Zhongnan province. The mushroom cloud formed by the explosion has already exceeded 100 kilometers and is still expanding. The smoke and dust are still moving. The satellites are unable to find traces of Fang Xinjian. Is he dead? He should be. That's 3 nuclear bombs with a yield of 50 million. The explosion this time around will probably have an irreversible effect on the entire Earth's magnetic field, environment, and atmospheric circulation. Hold on. Just then, a tremendous tremor rang out from the top of the command center. Countless amounts of mud and dust came down, as if something heavy had fallen from the sky. What's going on? Who's attacking? Show the surveillance footage to the big screen. In the surveillance footage, Fang Xinjian stood alone on the armor plate on the ground. He grabbed onto the Thunder Monarch, who was covered in blood and had been badly mutilated from the explosions, with one hand. Fang Xinjian's other hand held onto the white bone longsword. With a thrust, the white bone longsword pierced through the entire armor plate and once again headed deeper into the underground base. Damn it! Why is he charging over? Everyone, be on the highest alert! Everyone, be on the highest alert! Warning, this is not an act. I repeat, this is not an act. With a loud boom, the wall, which the sound had come from, was blasted apart. Fang Xinjian walked out slowly and saw over 100 mechanical soldiers starting to shoot at him. As the alarm in the entire command center rang out, countless troops took action. In the darkness, the densely packed mechanical soldiers trembled fiercely. At the next moment, many blood-red eyes lit up in the darkness. There seemed to be several 10,000 of them. One gate after another fell down. Poisonous gas, flames, and electricity filled every inch of space in front of Fang Xinjian. With a sweep of the sword, millions of sword ripples were formed, and countless robots were slashed into pieces. The poisonous gas was swept away, and the gates were blasted apart. The base's full defense was unable to stop Fang Xinjian for even a second. Damn it! He's coming! West Sector 3 has been completely destroyed. The 1st, 3rd, and 6th units have all been wiped out. All robots have been wiped out. The 32nd armor layer has been breached. The reinforcements will only arrive in 10 minutes. The target is still advancing. The target is advancing towards the final barrier. Force field shield activated. It's been destroyed. To think that a single attack could do so much damage, Fang Xinjian walked forward step by step. Faced with the surging metal storm, his light pursuit sword ripples were like many precise laser attacks, slashing through several 10,000 metal bullets. Following this, rocket launchers, machine guns, and poisonous gas bombs came surging out from the metal walls. However, each time one of them surged out, it would be destroyed by Fang Xinjian's light pursuit sword ripples. The target has broken through the 52nd underground level. The 3rd robot troop has been completely wiped out. The 52nd underground level has completely collapsed. Casualties unknown. Damn it, where's the reinforcements? Where's the reinforcements? The target has reached the final barrier. To be able to destroy the 30-meter-thick final barrier with just a single sword attack. Such destructive prowess. He's coming over. In the command center, the commander-in-chief looked at the metal armor above his head and slowly closed his eyes. At the next moment, streams of light shot out from the armor layer. With a boom, the entire armor layer was sliced into pieces, and Fang Xinjian dragged the Thunder Monarch and descended slowly. Sword intents swept out, and Fang Xinjian's voice rang out in the minds of the Federation's and Xian countries' military higher-ups. From today onward, you guys control Earth's future. And I control your life and death. In the Sahara Desert, the lower half of Li Shuanghua's body had been buried by sand and dust. However, she was unable to move her body at all. Her powers had been depleted to an extreme in the earlier battle with Fang Xinjian. She was already at her limit, not even fainting, let alone being able to move. Amidst the sand and dust, a soft bellow rang out, and the sandstorm was blown away. Fang Xinjian slowly descended from the sky and arrived before Li Shuanghua. Li Shuanghua looked at Fang Xinjian and said coldly, "Why, vile spawn? Are you here to kill me?" Fang Xinjian said calmly, "You've been wanting to kill me, your maternal grandson. But now, as long as you admit your mistakes to me, kneel down, apologize to my mother, and repent, I won't kill you. Are you unwilling as well?" Li Shuanghua closed her eyes. It was as if she could not be bothered to continue talking to Fang Xinjian. Fang Xinjian continued, "Do you think that the Earth's Federation, the other 5 great countries, or other divine-level experts will be able to save you?" Li Shuanghua opened her eyes, looked at Fang Xinjian, and said, "Do you think that you'll be able to suppress the world single-handedly?" What a joke. I've just left for 4 minutes and 50 seconds. I've already defeated the Thunder Monarch and the Despot and made a trip to the Joint Command Center of Xian Country and the Earth's Federation. They've already agreed to let me take your place and become the new director of the Earth's Federation. The corners of Li Shuanghua's lips curled up, and her eyes were filled with mockery. Do you think that I'll believe such childish lies? Fang Shijian shook his head. Li Shuanghua, it doesn't matter if you believe it or not. Today I'll cripple your cultivation first. We'll have plenty of time to slowly talk. I'll definitely make you lower your head. Fang Xinjian tapped out with his sword, and the infiltrating void sword exploded in Li Shuanghua's brain. It pierced into her cerebellum and a few nerves in her brain, cutting off Li Shuanghua's ability to control her physical body. In that instant, Li Shuanghua felt that the powers in her body had started to dissipate. Due to the decrease in her control over her physical body, she was unable to integrate the powers of her muscles and bones. As time went on, her physical body would become increasingly weaker without any training, becoming closer and closer to that of an ordinary person. However, what was even more fatal was Li Shuanghua's consciousness. From this day onward, as long as she focused, she would feel an intense pain in her brain as if she was being pricked by needles. She would no longer be able to activate her martial will, reassemble her physical body, attack, or cultivate. In the day that followed, the entire world's upper echelon was met with an unprecedented storm. The first to be affected was the Fang clan. With Li Shuanghua, the Fang clan's third son, Fang Yueming, and his wife, Hua Mimi, in the lead, several hundred people from the Fang clan were locked up in Demonic City's prison. The second son, Fang Yueha, had a meteoric rise. He became the Fang clan's representative and was in charge of all matters regarding the Fang clan. Chapter 510. 3 days had passed since that world-shaking battle. With Fang Xinjian's unrivaled sword arts, the entire Fang clan submitted to him. The second son of the Fang clan, Fang Yueha, also started to carry out drastic reforms. He either chased out the old people and those who were loyal to Li Shuanghua in the past or sent them to prison, bringing the Fang clan under his control completely. As one of the 5 great clans on Earth, the Fang clan's influence far surpassed the imagination of ordinary people. They had great influence in the areas of medicine, finance, real estate, food, industry, military, and politics. Even if Fang Yueha were to accept all of them, make adjustments, and carry out reforms, it would take him 1 or even 2 years. However, all of this had nothing to do with Fang Xinjian. He only existed as the Fang clan's clan head, and Fang Yueha was the one who carried out the actual task. In fact, putting aside power, Fang Xinjian was merely an 18-year-old young man. He could single-handedly kill thousands or even tens of thousands of Fang Yueha. However, in terms of management, finance, law, and many other aspects, he was no match for Fang Yueha, who had been managing the clan for many years. Moreover, he knew that his greatest reliance was his power. Wasting his cultivation time to manage the clan and develop influence would be neglecting the essentials. For the past few days, he stayed at the top floor of the Fang clan's building, condensing his specialties while comprehending what he had gained from the battle. This time around, the battle with the 3 divine-level experts had allowed Fang Xinjian to have a new comprehension of his sword art. Defeating Li Shuanghua and suppressing the Federation had made him feel great, and his hatred had been greatly reduced. His mental cultivation method had finally attained a breakthrough to level 9. Furthermore, when he had encountered the nuclear explosion at the end, it had given him a new idea of condensing physical particles. Right now, Tyrant had already turned into a young boy, sitting at the side with a displeased expression. He looked at Fang Xinjian and said, "Hello? When are we going back? The ether particle density or diabolic energy here is too little. I'll only be able to recover when we return to Miracle World." In the battle 3 days ago, due to the nuclear bomb, over 90% of Tyron's body had been vaporized. Moreover, he had lent a lot of energy to Fang Xinjian along the way, causing his recovery speed to be extremely slow. He would need to return to Miracle World to replenish his energy before he could fully recover. Fang Xinjian said, "Let's talk about it after I finish everything here. Maybe there's another way." Just then, Fang Yuehe walked in. When he saw Fang Xinjian, he said, "Xinjian, Caroline has been brought here. 3 days ago, she received news of your great victory and immediately tried to escape into Miracle World. However, she was arrested by the Navy on the spot. Caroline, the black woman of the Onassis family that Despot belonged to. 2 years ago, he had kidnapped Fang Xinjian and tortured Fang Xinjian. Now, without Fang Xinjian needing to make a move, the Onassis family had directly captured Caroline, as well as countless members of her family, including Caroline's parents, younger siblings, and hundreds of subordinates, servants, and relatives. Within 3 days, blood flowed like a river. Over 1/3 of the Onassis family's direct descendants were killed in one go. The Onassis family then transferred over several tens of trillions worth of wealth to the Fang clan, which was equivalent to the annual GDP of some countries. Similarly, due to the Thunder Monarch's failure, the Ford clan had also sacrificed countless companies, organizations, and technological research results. They could be said to have suffered a great loss. However, there was no other way. The divine-level experts of both their clans were now in Fang Xinjian's hands, and they had no choice but to give in. "Caroline?" Fang Xinjian said calmly, "Bring her in for us to take a look." A few minutes later, a black man who was covered in a bloody mess and seemed to be on his last breath from the torture was dragged over by the guards and thrown onto the ground. Caroline lifted her head and glared at Fang Xinjian with a pair of eyes filled with hatred. "Fang Xinjian, the thing I regret the most right now is that I didn't chop off your head back then." Fang Xinjian looked at Caroline. The latter had already become a level 29 magic prince warrior. However, the female expert who had been high and mighty in the past was now so weak that she could not even withstand a single blow. "Tyrant, eat her." Before Caroline could react, a black shadow had already pounced onto her. It was like a lump of plasticine, gradually wrapping around her and starting to digest her. Tyrant had been craving for this for a very long time. If it was not because Fang Xinjian had been keeping an eye on him, he would have long since started to engulf living creatures to replenish the depletion of his physical body. Caroline struggled crazily, her expression filled with extreme terror. She kept on crying out agonizingly and begging for mercy. There were not many people who could watch as their bodies were engulfed like this. Leaving Caroline to cry out agonizingly at the side, Fang Xinjian then looked at Fang Yuehe and asked, "Has the Federation approved of the nuclear missiles?" The previous time Fang Xinjian had experienced a nuclear explosion, it had helped him to explode and stimulate over 100 physical particles. This had greatly increased his interest in nuclear missiles, and he planned to try out nuclear missiles or even radiation to see if they could be used to accelerate the rate at which he condensed physical particles. There were almost no demigods in the entire miracle world who could achieve one tier of perfection at 1.08 billion physical particles. If Fang Xinjian could do it, he would have a chance to achieve 5 tiers of perfection, which was unprecedented in history. There are no problems with the nuclear explosion experiment. As for the radiation experiment, arrangements have been made for the laboratory, Fang Yuehe said. "We can start at any time." Fang Xinjian nodded in satisfaction and then asked, "How is Li Shuanghua?" Fang Yuehe said, "We locked her up alone. However, she had a headache the moment she started training. She seems to have gotten used to it now and is doing some basic training every day. Although she can't unleash her battle prowess, her fighting spirit is still very strong." Fang Xinjian naturally knew that it was impossible for Li Shuanghua to give in so easily. Every divine-level expert had extraordinary talent, determination, and wisdom. They would not give up even under desperate circumstances. Otherwise, they would not have been able to become divine-level experts. Fang Xinjian said, "Let's go and take a look at her." In the underground prison in the southeast of Demonic City, Li Shuanghua was still lying on the ground, doing push-up. Her eyes were filled with fighting spirit, as if she had not been affected at all by the fact that her cultivation had been crippled. However, with her cultivation crippled, the training she did was about the same as that of an ordinary person. She was unable to circulate her vital energy and blood, bones, muscles, and other body movements, nor could she unleash any extraordinary powers. No matter how much training she did, she would only be at the level of an Olympic champion. Just then, the sound of an engine rang out, and the steel door to the prison opened bit by bit. Li Shuanghua stopped her training and looked in the direction of the door. Accompanied by Fang Yuehe, Fang Shijian walked in slowly. He looked at Li Shuanghua and said, "It seems that you're still quite energetic. As expected of a divine-level expert. Even at this stage, you still haven't given up hope." Li Shuanghua said coldly, "Vile spawn, what on earth do you want? I'll say this first. Even if you kill me, you can forget about me lowering my head to you." Chapter 511. Fang Xinjian, do you think that I'm a 3-year-old kid? If you want me to kneel down and apologize, you won't kill me. If you want to break down my martial will and humiliate me, you should at least tell a reliable lie. Now that things have come to this, it's either one of us who dies. If you want to kill me, then kill me. If you want to humiliate me, then don't even think about it. Li Shuanghua then looked at Fang Yuehe and said coldly, "Unfilial son, are you going to help the evildoer as well?" Fang Yuehe lowered his head and said calmly, "Mother, ever since you became the clan head, you've been acting recklessly, going against the grain, appointing people through favoritism, and only knowing how to give all the good stuff to third brother's family. Do you think that everyone will really submit to you? If it wasn't for the fact that you're powerful and a divine-level expert, everyone would have long since overthrown you." Li Shuanghua looked at Fang Yuehe, and hints of fury flashed in her eyes. "Fine, fine, fine. Remember what you've said today. When I recover my powers and take control of the Fang clan again, the first thing I'll do is kill you, an unfilial son." "Mother, just admit defeat," Fang Yuehe said calmly. "The outcome has been decided. Xinjian's sword arts have shaken the world. You don't stand a chance." Li Shuanghua merely smiled coldly, not believing what Fang Yuehe had said. Therefore, the Fang clan's second son, Fang Yuehe, said, "Mr. Thunder Monarch, Mr. Despot, please come in for a while. Also, bring third brother and sister-in-law in." The silver-haired Thunder Monarch and the Despot, who had shrunk to a height of over 2 meters, walked in slowly. Right now, the two of them did not appear to have any aura or spirit, just like ordinary people. Clearly, their cultivations had also been crippled by Fang Xinjian. They were unable to activate the power of their physical bodies, unleash the prowess of their martial wills, or perform any extraordinary powers. Furthermore, they had been seriously injured by Fang Xinjian previously, and their extraordinary powers were immediately crippled. This caused them to be unable to recover from their injuries, and they were constantly in a state of being seriously injured. If it was not because Fang Xinjian had treated their fatal injuries, their physical bodies might have died completely. At the sight of this scene, Li Shuanghua's eyes narrowed like a cat's as she stared at the two divine-level experts before her, as if unable to believe all of this. After that, the Fang clan's third son, Fang Yueming, and Hua Mimi also walked in wearing prisoners' clothes. When they saw Li Shuanghua, who had become a prisoner, intense despair flashed in their eyes. When they looked at Fang Xinjian, their hearts were filled with hatred, fury, despair, and bewilderment. Even their greatest support, Li Shuanghua, had lost to Fang Xinjian, leaving them at a loss and in despair about their future. Fang Yueha continued. The Thunder Monarch and Mr. Despicable were both suppressed by Xinjiang. Right now, their cultivations have been crippled and they are temporarily staying at the Fang clan as guests. Hearing this, Li Shuanghua's countenance changed slightly, and the countenances of Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi changed drastically. The despair in their eyes grew even stronger, and they started to look at Fang Xinjiang with a pitiful and pleading gaze. Fang Xinjiang could sense that with the appearance of the Thunder Monarch and Despicable, Li Shuanghua's will was clearly shaken. Although she did not seem to have changed, she was actually very shocked by the Thunder Monarch and Despicable's defeat. Fang Xinjiang looked at Li Shuanghua and said, Thunder Monarch, Despicable, if you're willing to fully support me and Fang Yueha in the Earth's Federation in the future, it's not that I can't let you guys go. I can even consider removing the sword intent restrictions on you guys. What? Are you serious? Both the Thunder Monarch and Despicable lifted their heads and looked at Fang Xinjiang in disbelief. If the two of them were in Fang Xinjiang's shoes, there was no way they would let them go so easily after having defeated two divine-level experts after so much difficulty. The Thunder Monarch frowned and said, Aren't you afraid that we'll continue to make an enemy out of you after we recover our cultivation? Fang Xinjiang said calmly, With my sword arts, it'll only take a single thought for me to kill the two of you. So what if I recover your cultivation? Even if you were to attain another breakthrough, it'll be as easy as flipping my hand for me to kill the two of you. If you don't believe me, you can give it a try after you've recovered your cultivation. Hearing Fang Xinjiang's words, the two of them closed their brows and sank into deep thought for a moment. The Despicable was the first to be unable to take it. Having gotten used to violence and the Despicable's powerful physical body, the Despicable was not used to feeling weak for 3 consecutive days. After all, his power came from his physical body and spirit, which were the most fundamental things. How uncomfortable was he to be crippled now? How uncomfortable was he? Out of the 3 divine-level experts present, the Despicable was the one who relied the most on his physical body. This was only because divine-level experts had strong wills. If it had been anyone else, they would probably have committed suicide directly. Hearing Fang Xinjiang's words, the Despicable said directly, Fang Xinjiang, the conflict between us is just over Carolyn. Her entire branch has been wiped out, and we've handed her over to you. Therefore, the conflict between us isn't really considered much of a conflict. As long as you recover my cultivation, from today onward, the entire Onassis clan and I will treat you as our leader. Of course, the Despicable's words contained both truth and falsehood. Since he had come to Fang Xinjiang's side, it was impossible for his loyalty to be too high. If the situation was favorable, he might even rebel. After all, which one of the divine-level experts did not have many fortuitous encounters and great talent? Which one of them did not see themselves as the center of the world? However, after Despot finished speaking, Fang Xinjiang only nodded. That makes sense. Then, he glanced sideways at Despot and said, But who told you to stand and talk to me? After Fang Xinjiang said this, Despot's face suddenly turned red, and his eyes became bloodshot. He said, You want me to kneel to you? Aren't you going to respect me? Fang Xinjiang waved his hand and a burst of power erupted from his hands. He compressed the air, and turned it into layers of heavy pressure that pressed down on Despot's body, causing him to slowly kneel on the ground. Looking at Despot's bloodshot eyes and extremely ferocious face, Fang Xinjiang said indifferently, You're not convinced? Despot lowered his head. He was afraid that if he were to raise his head, the killing intent in his eyes would be too obvious. He clenched his fists tightly and bellowed, That's enough, Fang Xinjiang. From today onward, the entire Onassis clan will respect you. My entire clan and I will become the Fang clan's vassals. Accompanied by his actions and words, his eyes suddenly dimmed, and the martial will in his mind continued to shatter. Such humiliation was a severe blow to the condensed martial will of a divine-level expert. Despot said in an extremely dispirited manner, "I'm convinced." Fang Xinjian nodded and tapped out with a sword finger. He took away the sword intent restrictions on Despot's body and healed the damage to his brain. Despot clutched his head and let out an agonizing cry. However, he got up very quickly, and the black magic prints all over his body continued to spread out. His vital energy and blood circulated, and his tendons, bones, and muscles started to stretch. He had already started to recover from his injuries and regain his strength. In just 1 or 2 hours, he would probably be able to recover more than half of his battle prowess. Chapter 5:12. His power had finally returned. Sensing his strong physical body and the seething power that kept on growing in his body, the despot broke into an excited smile. However, at the next moment, Fang Xinjian shook his head and said, "My power has recovered. Now we can settle another score." "What?" The despot looked at Fang Xinjian, puzzled. "I've received news that your clan's butler said that if you ask Li Shuanghua to join forces with you, you'll have to hand over half of my mother's corpse? Are you the one who said this?" Fang Xinjian's gaze was like sharp sword light, encompassing the despot's body. At this moment, his killing aura seemed to have materialized, encompassing the despot entirely. Hearing this, the despot knew that the situation was not good. He stood up abruptly, wanting to escape with all his might. Black magic prints flashed explosively, turning into surges of materialized power that smashed onto Fang Xinjian's body. Simultaneously, the despot retreated abruptly, wanting to escape. However, he was not a match for Fang Xinjian even at his peak condition, let alone now when he had just started to recover. When the despot's martial will struck onto Fang Xinjian's body, it was blocked by the Heaven's Volition sword intent. Fang Xinjian did not even waver. Simultaneously, the despot's physical body had just taken a step back when he was struck by Fang Xinjian's palm across space. His flesh and blood shattered, and he was smashed into the metal wall like a meatball. The despot's entire body was distorted, and his eyes were filled with hatred as he looked at Fang Xinjian. He said, "Fang Xinjian, going back on your words and doing whatever you want won't end well." Fang Xinjian smiled. "This is what you call doing whatever I want?" He shook his wrist and tossed Tyrant toward the despot, saying, "Tyrant, let him know what it means to do whatever you want." Looking at this divine-level expert's body, Tyrant was extremely excited. Although the other party's vital energy and blood had deteriorated severely, he still had the qualities of a divine-level expert. After engulfing this body, his physical strength would definitely increase once again. In the next moment, the entire prison cell was filled with screams, chewing sounds, and all sorts of sounds of bones and flesh being crushed. Looking at the brutal scene before them, Fang Yuehe, Fang Yueming, and Hua Mimi all wore horrified expressions. A hint of pity also flashed in the Thunder Monarch's eyes. Li Shuanghua was the only one who remained expressionless from the very beginning. It was as if nothing could shake her soul. Immediately after, Fang Xinjian looked toward the Thunder Monarch. The Thunder Monarch felt an incomparably heavy pressure in his heart when his gaze swept past him. The brutal and tragic scene seemed to be imprinted in his mind, and he would never be able to get rid of it. Various conflicting emotions flashed in the Thunder Monarch's heart. Finally, he sighed. The Thunder Monarch also revealed a helpless expression as he said to Fang Xinjian, "Fang Xinjian, if I were to acknowledge you as my master, would you deal with me like how you dealt with Despot?" Fang Xinjian shook his head. "There's actually no great enmity between us, and I don't have any opinions about you either. If you're willing to submit to me, I'll naturally let you off." Hearing Fang Xinjian's reply, the Thunder Monarch nodded and said, "All right then. Fang Xinjian, as long as you recover my cultivation, from today onward, I'll advance and retreat together with you in the Federation and acknowledge you as my master. Divine-level powers were extremely rare, and they had gone through a lot of hard work to attain them. So what if they just submitted slightly to Fang Xinjian? They were not like Li Shuanghua or Despot, who had many conflicts with Fang Xinjian and were unable to lower their heads. Moreover, looking at Despot's miserable state, the Thunder Monarch could not bring himself to reject him. Thinking of how he would have to watch himself being eaten up bit by that monster, even the Thunder Monarch felt his hair stand up. Hearing the Thunder Monarch's words, Li Shuanghua lifted her head abruptly. Are you crazy? You're going to submit to this vile spawn just like that? When Tiandao and the others return, or when the Mage Association finds out about the situation here, do you think that you'll be in for a good time? The other two divine-level experts in the Federation, Tiandao and Titan, had been in Miracle World all this while and had not returned. The Fang clan's Fang Xingqian was the Mage Association's Black Mage King's disciple and had many connections with the Fang clan and Li Shuanghua. The Thunder Monarch smiled bitterly and said, even if the Black Mage King comes to Demonic City, he won't be able to perform much black magic. As for Tiandao and the others, even if they attain another breakthrough, they won't be a match for Xinjiang right now. Old lady, why can't you understand? With Fang Xinjiang's current cultivation, it's enough for him to take the world by storm and become the strongest on earth. Why must you still be so stubborn? Fang Yuehe also said, that's right. Xinjiang's sword arts are unrivaled in the world right now. Moreover, how long has it been since he started cultivating? Not only is he the leader of our Fang clan, but he's also the hope of our Earth in the future. With him around, we won't be at a disadvantage when we talk to the Mage Association or even the other divine-level experts in Miracle World in the future. Just give in. Damn it. Xinjiang becoming the strongest on Earth and becoming the Federation's pillar of support is already a trend. Why must you still be so stubborn? Fang Xinjiang smiled and pierced out with the infiltrating void, removing the sword intent restrictions on the Thunder Monarch. The moment the sword intent restrictions were removed, the Thunder Monarch started to activate the martial will in his body. Electricity flashed on his body, and he started to recover his physical body and battle prowess. His face was filled with joy. Li Shuanghua looked at the Thunder Monarch, who had recovered his powers, and smiled coldly. For you to lower your head so easily means that your will isn't pure. This means that you've left behind flaws in your heart, and you no longer have the spirit to press forward with an indomitable spirit. Even if you recover your powers now, you won't have any hopes of reaching a higher level in the future. It might seem easy, but in reality, you're just cutting off your own future. You're really ignorant and laughable. A hint of a cold smile flashed on the Thunder Monarch's face as he said, Li Shuanghua, why are you still being so stubborn? Moreover, my ideals are different from egomaniacs like you. In my opinion, the path of martial arts requires one to be flexible, to be able to endure all sorts of setbacks, failures, and to admit one's weakness. This is what it means to have a strong will. If one is unable to even admit a little bit of failure and still wants to leave behind flaws after admitting defeat, then that kind of will is what it means to be truly weak. To be indomitable despite all setbacks and to not regret even 9 deaths. Do you really understand the meaning of these 2 sentences? Fang Yuehe continued, Mother, just admit defeat. After all, no matter what you say, it's useless. It's because no matter what you say, we can easily kill you right now. You don't even have the right to escape. This is the reality of things. Or do you think that the Black Mage King or Fang Xingqian will be able to save you? With Xinjiang's current battle prowess, as long as he comes to Demonic City, the Black Mage King won't be able to borrow the powers of the evil gods, and it'll be impossible for him to win. As for Fang Xingqian, why don't you open your eyes wide and take a look at Xinjiang's current cultivation? Fang Xingqian's talent can't even be compared to Xinjiang's. Do you still not understand? Li Shuanghua did not say a word and remained expressionless. It was as if she could not be bothered to continue arguing with everyone, yet it was also as if nothing would be able to change her mind. Chapter 513. Just then, Fang Xinjian spoke again. Third uncle, do you guys want to live? If you're willing to mend your ways, turn over a new leaf, apologize to me, and even convince Li Shuanghua to lower her head, I can consider letting you guys live. Fang Yueming's gaze instantly changed, and a strong hint of hesitation appeared on his face. Although he would no longer have extraordinary powers and authority, it would still be good to be able to live. Furthermore, with the despot and the thunder monarch as examples, he was truly shocked. However, Hua Mimi could not care less. She pulled Fang Yueming down and knelt down, saying, Xinjian, your talent is world-shaking. Right now, you've even shaken the entire world with just you and your sword. We were the ones who were short-sighted and failed to recognize Mount Tai. We were the ones who looked down on you. Please be magnanimous and let us off this time. From today onward, we'll definitely forsake the darkness for the light and support you with all our might. The Fang clan's third son, Fang Yueming, said furiously, What are you saying? Are you crazy? You might be shameless, but I'm not. Hua Mimi also cried out, Fang Yueming, you good for nothing. I've had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to have married you. You've been listening to your mother all your life, revolving around her. Is she your wife, or am I your wife? This old woman has gone crazy and wants to die. Don't drag me down with you. You! Fang Yueming looked at his wife, as if he was looking at a stranger. Hua Mimi dragged him down to his knees and cried out, Fang Yueming, can't you be a man for once? Even Lord Thunder Monarch and Lord Despot have given in. Do you still want me to die with you and your mother? Fang Yueming's countenance kept on changing. In fact, he was a profligate son to begin with and was very afraid of death. However, he had been unable to put down his pride when facing Fang Xinjian. However, after the Thunder Monarch, Despot, and his own wife had given in, he could no longer hold on. Fang Yueming looked at Li Shuanghua and said, Mother, the situation is really hopeless now. Why don't you just admit your mistake? Moreover, Xinjian is a member of our Fang clan. If you can admit your mistake and join forces with him, our Fang clan will be the strongest clan on earth. Haven't you always wanted to revitalize the Fang clan? Shut up. Li Shuanghua's eyes suddenly widened, and an unprecedented rage was reflected in her eyes. It should be said that even when Li Shuanghua had been defeated by Fang Xinjian and her cultivation had been sealed, such fury had not appeared in her eyes. However, now that her youngest son, whom she doted on the most, was advising her to admit defeat, her will was filled with fury. Li Shuanghua glared at Fang Yueming and said, Unfilial son, are you also going to side with that vile spawn, Fang Xinjian, and rebel against our Fang clan? He threatened you, so you should die to prove your loyalty. Even if you die, you won't accept his threat. Hua Mimi shouted from the side, Mom, Yueming is your son. If you really dote on him, then apologize to Xinjian. Do you really want to see your own son die? Shut up. Tch. Li Shuanghua immediately wanted to stand up and dash up to beat Hua Mimi to death. However, her physical body was as weak as an ordinary person's. With just a single thought from Fang Xinjian, she stopped her actions, rendering her unable to move. However, looking at this scene, she still felt exhilarated, and the circulation of her mental cultivation method became increasingly smooth. It was as if all the negative emotions in her heart had been swept away. Tch. From today onward, you've been expelled from the Fang clan. You're no longer a member of the Fang clan. When I break free, the first thing I'll do is to kill you with my palm. The Fang clan's second son, Fang Yueha, shook his head. Mother, are you still thinking of breaking free even now? He had long been disappointed with his mother's partiality and stubbornness. Right now, he pointed to his third son and his wife and said, "Mother, do you know that your management of the Fong clan has been a failure? In the process of us taking over the Fong clan, we didn't encounter any resistance at all. Everyone has long since refused to submit to your rule. It's just that you've been forcefully suppressing them. Look, even your third son, whom you dote on the most, wants to rebel against you. Right now, you're completely isolated. Do you still not understand whether what you've been doing all these years was right or wrong?" Every single muscle in Li Shuanghua's body tensed up, and the will in her mind surged crazily. Even though she was in so much pain that her face was contorted, she was still crazily urging her powers, wanting to break free from Fang Xinjian's restrictions. "Unfilial son, do you really think that you've gained the upper hand? As long as you don't kill me, there'll be a day when I break free, suppress all of you, and reform the Fang clan." Fang Xinjian looked at the savage Li Shuanghua and felt extremely exhilarated. His mental cultivation method circulated increasingly faster, and his proficiency in it increased rapidly. He was showing signs of achieving a breakthrough again. "Take them away." At the side, Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi were brought away by the guards. At this moment both of them were really anxious. Seeing that they were being dragged away by the guards, Fang Yueming shouted anxiously, "Xinjian, Xinjian, don't kill me! I beg of you, as long as you're willing to let me off, I'll definitely make that old hag lower her head. Right now, she's a cripple. If you let me torture her every day and feed her shit, she'll definitely give in." Hua Mimi also shouted crazily, "Li Shuanghua, you damned old hag! Are you really going to watch as your son and daughter-in-law die? You damned old hag! Hurry up and kowtow to Fang Xinjian and apologize." Fang Xinjian smiled at Li Shuanghua. "Li Shuanghua, you're really a failure as a person. You can't even discipline your own son." However, Li Shuanghua seemed to have completely calmed down. She said calmly, "I'll just take it that these unfilial sons and daughters have never existed. As for my martial will, even if you kill me, you can forget about making me submit to you. Of course, I won't kill you so easily. Only by making you submit completely and lower your head will it be considered a victory for me." With that, she suddenly waved her hand and got the guards to keep Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi behind. She said, "Since you're so stubborn and refuse to admit your mistakes, I can only use violence to make you submit." With that, Fang Xinjian brought Li Shuanghua, his second son Fang Yueha, his third son Fang Yueming, and Hua Mimi to the Fang clan's mourning hall. Looking at the many memorial tablets in the mourning hall, Fang Xinjian said calmly, "Over 2 years ago, it was here that you used violence to force me to kneel, threatening me to give up my freedom and become Fang Xingchen's slave for life. Li Shuanghua, how do you think my current achievements are compared to Fang Xingchen's?" Seeing that Li Shuanghua did not say anything, Fang Xinjian said calmly, "My current talent and cultivation are more than 10,000 times stronger than Fang Xingchen's. Li Shuanghua, these sons and grandsons that you've nurtured are just a bunch of trash when compared to me. Do you still not understand? 2 years ago you used violence to force me. Today I'll use violence to make you repent and atone for your sins." As he spoke, Fang Xinjian waved his hand, and the air flowed as he pushed Li Shuanghua to the memorial tablet of Fang Xinjian's mother, Fang Yueru. "Li Shuanghua, today you'll kneel down and admit your mistakes to my mother, repent and atone for your sins." At the sight of this, Li Shuanghua finally could not hold it in any longer and spoke up, "Be ****. You want me to kneel down to this unfilial daughter? Can your mother afford to accept this? Aren't you afraid that she'll die from anger in the netherworld?" Chapter 514. Fang Xinjian shook his head. Stubborn. As Fang Xinjian spoke, he slapped down with his palm. His pure physical strength compressed the air like an invisible palm, pressing Li Shuanghua down to her knees. Li Shuanghua dropped to her knees with a bang, and her face turned into the color of a pig's liver. Hints of green light kept on emitting from her body, as if wanting to break through the restrictions. Seeing her in this state, Fang Xinjian let out a cold laugh. With a flick of his wrist, Tyrant pounced out and encompassed her body. Streams of green light seeped into Li Shuanghua's body, ceaselessly engulfing her physical tissues. You be **starred. Li Shuanghua felt that her body was being engulfed incessantly. Tyrant had just engulfed the body of a divine-level expert. Although the despot was seriously injured and could not use any of his powers, his physical attributes were still there. After eating it, Tyrant would be a great tonic. Under Tyrant's engulfment, Li Shuanghua's martial will kept on turning into her physical body to make up for the damage. Her martial will started to dissipate rapidly, and panic finally appeared in her eyes. Do you think that I don't know that you've been accumulating power, wanting to break through my sword intent? Today, I'll completely take away your cultivation so that you can peacefully atone for your sins to my mother every day. As he spoke, Fang Xinjian tapped out across space with a finger, and another stream of sword intent slashed down. This time around, Li Shuanghua felt that she had completely lost the ability to control her martial will. Her martial will was like a great river that kept on flowing into her physical body, ceaselessly making up for the damage to her physical tissues. However, her physical body continued to be engulfed and absorbed by Tyrant. This meant that the power of her martial will was ceaselessly dissipating. In the blink of an eye, her martial will dissipated rapidly, becoming increasingly lesser. In the end, it was even weaker than ordinary people, and her physical body had deteriorated to the point that it was like an 80-year-old old man. At this moment, even if Fang Xinjian were to remove the sword intent restrictions he had left on her, Li Shuanghua would still have to cultivate anew in order to recover her cultivation. At the next moment, Tyrant retreated. He had absorbed a tremendous amount of flesh and blood from 2 divine-level experts consecutively. Although the physical bodies of Magic Prince warriors were far from that of knights, they were still a great supplement for him. Fang Xinjian tapped out 3 times consecutively, once again leaving behind 3 streams of sword intent in Li Shuanghua's body. If any martial will were to appear, it would be scattered by these 3 gushes of sword intent. From now on, Li Shuanghua's cultivation base was completely lost, and she was no different from an ordinary old woman. At this moment, Li Shuanghua, who was kneeling on the ground, seemed to have aged 30 years in an instant. Fang Xinjian said to Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi, "Aren't the 2 of you going to help her kowtow and apologize?" Yes. Fang Yueming nodded and bowed, saying, "Leave it to us." As he spoke, Fang Yueming had already pressed down on Li Shuanghua's left and right sides, starting to make her kneel down and kowtow. Fang Yueming shouted, "Xinjian, don't worry. From now on, leave this old lady to us. We'll guarantee that she'll sincerely kowtow and apologize to eldest sister every day, morning, afternoon, and night." Li Shuanghua was so angry that her body was trembling, and hints of tears finally trickled down from the corners of her eyes. At this moment, she had lost all of her power, her martial will was shattered, and she was even forced to kneel down to her deceased eldest daughter by her youngest son, whom she doted on the most. In this instant, Li Shuanghua's worldview finally collapsed completely. Her eyes were filled with nothing but despair. She looked at Fang Yueru, who was on the memorial tablet, and laughed bitterly. "Fang Yueru, you unfilial daughter. You really have a good son. My son can't be compared to your son. I've lost." Fang Xinjian shook his head and left the Fang clan's old manor. Behind him, Hua Mimi slapped Li Shuanghua's face and pressed down on her head, smashing it against the ground. "Damned old woman, what are you shouting for? Quickly admit your mistake and apologize." Over the next few days, Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi pressed Li Shuanghua to the ground to kowtow and apologize every day. Faced with Li Shuanghua's disobedience, Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi would beat and scold her at every turn. Right now, they had already vented all of their resentment onto Li Shuanghua. Even when Li Shuanghua went on a hunger strike, they would pry open her mouth and force everything down her throat. This was especially when Fang Xinjian was still in Demonic City. Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi seemed to be afraid that they would be killed by Fang Xinjian if they were to slack off. Thus, they forced Li Shuanghua to do whatever she wanted, day and night. Even the servants would mock, glare, and mock Li Shuanghua. It was because Li Shuanghua had too many rules in the clan, and she would often be punished with the clan's rules. She had even beaten or injured many maids and maids. Countless people secretly hated her. Now that her cultivation had been crippled, it had not been a big deal at the start. However, after 1 or 2 days, there were already people who started to kick her when she was down. There were even people who were not part of the Fang clan who secretly came to the Fang clan's mourning hall to observe Li Shuanghua's pathetic state of being old and unable to put up any resistance. It had only been a few days, but Li Shuanghua felt that it had been longer than her entire life. Wave after wave of humiliation, the feeling of falling from the highest peak to the lowest valley, caused the despair in her eyes to grow increasingly stronger, and she sank into the lowest valley of her life. One night, while Fang Yueming and Hua Mimi were fast asleep, Li Shuanghua took a long cloth and walked under the eave. Behind her, Fang Xinjian stood in the shadows, not saying a single word. The next morning, Fang Yueming came to the top floor of the building and reported, "Xinjian, Li Shuanghua committed suicide by hanging herself yesterday." Fang Xinjian said calmly, "Give her a proper burial. Also, as a divine-level expert of this generation, there's a need for a few of them to accompany her in death." Fang Yueming's countenance changed. "You're saying Fang Yuehe and Hua Mimi have committed all sorts of evil deeds. I won't be able to feel at ease with them around. I understand now." At this moment, the matter with the Fang clan was completely settled. Fang Xinjian felt that his mind was in a state of tranquility. His mental cultivation method circulated at an extreme speed, and silver light burst out in his mind. At this moment, his universal sword dominance lunisolar mental cultivation method had finally reached level 10. At the next moment, Fang Xinjian opened his eyes, and there seemed to be silver light bursting out from them. He said calmly to Fang Yueming, "Prepare to start the nuclear explosion experiment." During this period of time when Fang Xinjian was dealing with the matters on Earth, a tremendous change happened in Miracle World. March 1st, 12 o'clock at night. In Miracle World's night sky, a myriad of starlight lit up simultaneously for an entire night before disappearing once again. In a valley in the north of the empire, the first prince looked at the starlight in the sky and laughed out loud. "The Milky Way is rising, and the world is going through a metamorphosis. As expected, I didn't miscalculate. Today is a good day for me to attain a breakthrough to the divine level." Both inside and outside the valley, countless experts dropped to their knees. Streams of aura soared into the sky, turning all the animals and bugs within a range of 100 lis into dust. At the next moment, shouts that were like mountains and tsunamis gushed out. "May your Highness lead a long life and unify the human world. May your Highness lead a long life and unify the human world. May your Highness lead a long life and unify the human world." The first prince's eyes were tightly shut, and streams of aura that were like sulfur from hell extended out from his body, seeming to gradually materialize. As the seventh onslaught gets closer and closer, the world's metamorphosis has finally arrived. The path forward has been opened, and a turbulent era is about to begin. Countless experts, heroes, and sovereigns will be born. The first prince broke into an excited smile, and streams of flames that represented his ambition burned in his eyes. "And the truth will prove that I'm the strongest." Chapter 5:15. On the west coast of Miracle World, in the capital of the Uranless Federation, where the headquarters of the Mage Association was located, Phantom City. At the very center of the city, all the buildings were encompassed in a thin layer of fog. Unlike the Sky City in the Empire's capital, the Phantom City of the Mage Association was said to have been moved to an alternate dimension. Although one could see and hear it, without permission, one would never be able to enter. The tallest tower in the center of Phantom City, which was 1,000 meters tall, was the Magic Tower of the Mage Association's #1 expert, the Black Mage King. Right now, Fong Xingchen, who belonged to the third generation of the Fong clan, was kneeling on the ground. This person, who had been tested to have the talent to become a red-robed mage, had become the Black Mage King's disciple, and had been cultivating in Phantom City for the past 2 years. Fong Xingchen, who was only 6 years old, had already grown to the size of a 13 or 14-year-old child. He was 1.5 meters tall, and his entire body was covered in muscles. His face was mature and resolute, and it was impossible to tell that he was only 6 years old. Moreover, there were 2 small bumps on his forehead, as if there was something brewing in them. It was clear that he had made great progress in cultivating the red-robed faction's black magic over the past 2 years. Right now, he was kneeling on the ground, his eyes flashing with deep-rooted hatred. Master, my parents and grandmother were all forced to their deaths by that B***starred, Fong Xinjian. Please take action once and kill Fong Xinjian to avenge me. Before Fong Xingchen was an elderly man with a withered body, who looked like a skeleton. The elderly man was sitting on a rocking chair, swaying back and forth as the chair swayed. Hearing Fong Xingchen's words, the elderly man said slowly, "Xingchen, I won't take action for something like this. It's just a mere Fong Xinjian, a good-for-nothing who hasn't even reached the divine level, and yet you want me to take action? What a fool. If word of this gets out, others will laugh at you. The most important thing when you're out in the world is your reputation. Without your reputation, you won't be able to have a strong will, and you won't even be able to cultivate." Fong Xingchen lifted his head, a little unconvinced, and said, "But..." The Black Mage King frowned, patted the chair and said, "Isn't it just your parents who died? When I came out at the age of 10, my entire family was drowned by my enemies and fed to the fish. Aren't they still fine now? If you want to take revenge, you should cultivate yourself. After a few years, you'll have to force that bastard to eat shit. That's the rule." Fong Xingchen lowered his head with a grim expression, clearly dissatisfied with this outcome. Just then, a gray mist slowly floated in from the window, forming a vague human figure. The Black Mage King's eyes slanted slightly, and the centipede-like scar on his face appeared increasingly savage. "Grey Worm? You're not dead? You dare to come here? Aren't you afraid that madman Een will chop you to death?" The person who had just arrived was one of the top characters among the gray-robed mages, the Terrene Shrine's upper echelon, the gray-robed Mage Worm King. Hearing the Black Mage King's words, the gray fog trembled a little and turned into an extremely ugly big worm. It grinned and said, "Old man, it's been many years since we last met, but you're still as ugly as ever. You're probably the person that Silver Lunatic wants to kill the most right now. He doesn't have the time to bother me. The world's metamorphosis has come, and the density of ether particles will increase by 1,000 or even 10,000 times. The speed of cultivation will get increasingly faster, and the true path after the divine level will be opened up soon. I wonder how many experts will appear from the Church of Universal Truth this time around. You came here to tell me this." The Black Mage King smiled coldly and said, "When has our Mage Association ever been afraid of them? What are you doing here? If you don't tell me, I'll squash you to death." The incarnation of the Worm King smiled and said, "Fong Xinjian, this guy is from Earth, right? He killed quite a few of our men. I'm here to ask if he's related to you." Hearing the words Fong Xinjian, a gleam flashed in Fong Xingchen's eyes. The Black Mage King shook his head and said, "You want to touch him? He's not one of us. He came from Earth on his own. I think he's a hybrid of an Earthling and a miracle person. He has the body of a miracle person and has also cultivated the Empire's path of night." Grey Worm broke into a satisfied smile. "I understand. Then we don't have to hold back anymore," the Black Mage King said in disdain. "He's in Demonic City now. You gray-robed mages are useless without diabolic energy. If you go to Demonic City, be careful not to be beaten to death by him." "Humph, there's no need for you to say that. We naturally have our ways." Then Scram. Heading north from Miracle World, past the Plains Steel Lion Kingdom, past the Marxell Papal Kingdom where the headquarters of the Holy See of Truth was located, they arrived at the northernmost part of Miracle World, arriving at the country of Frost, Manger. It was different from the Empire's ruling structure from the cities to the regions to the royal family. It was different from the Mage Association's federation system. It was different from the Plains style of the Steel Lion Kingdom. It was also different from the Sand Country's slavery system. It was also different from the Papal State's religious system. Manger, this country amidst the frost, still had the structure of many primitive tribes. The leader of all the tribes was known as the King of Manger. This generation's King of Manger was the Frostwolf tribe's Hellwolf Zax. Right now, in the Frostwolf tribe, a silver-haired man was lying next to a bonfire, looking at the roasted meat on the bonfire silently. The silver-haired man looked to be in his 30s or 40s. He had smooth skin, a slender and powerful figure, and his eyes revealed endless vicissitudes of life. Next to him, the strongest expert in Manger, this generation's King of Manger, the Hellwolf Zax, who had stepped into the divine level for over 20 years, was kneeling on the ground, roasting the meat for the silver-haired man. His expression was one of unprecedented respect. Suddenly, the tent was opened, and a young man with short silver hair walked in. As he entered, a bloody stench came gushing out. It was as if the stench had taken on a material form and was about to enter everyone's noses. Smelling this bloody stench, the Hellwolf Zax almost broke down. He looked at the young man with short silver hair and said, "What have you done?" The young man with short silver hair did not look at him. Instead, he looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Master, kill all those who deserve to die." The middle-aged man nodded, and Zax became enraged. "Who are you guys? Who on earth are you guys? Why are you guys massacring our Frostwolf tribe?" Right now, the Hellwolf Zax, who had once dominated the Ice Plains and was invincible, wore a look of despair and fury. He had been happily hunting with a few elders and priests when the two people before him had descended from the sky. The middle-aged man had not made a move, but the young man had attacked consecutively and defeated all of the Frostwolf tribe's elders and priests. As the strongest expert in the Ice Plains, he had not been able to take a single punch from the other party. Including him, there were a total of 3 divine-level experts and over 20 level 29 warriors. To think that they could not even take a single blow from the other party. Hearing the Hellwolf Zax's cries, the silver-haired middle-aged man threw him a sideways glance and said, "When the Frostwolf tribe fights with other tribes, it's the law of the jungle. I don't care. However, 1 month ago, after you guys defeated the Shadowwolf tribe, not only did you massacre our warriors, but you even raped women and children, burned pregnant women to death, tortured girls, dug out the babies in their wombs, and stabbed them to death. The entire Shadowwolf tribe has turned into a living hell. This makes me very unhappy. This makes me very unhappy. If I don't kill you guys, I won't be able to sleep tonight." The silver-haired middle-aged man shook his head. "You guys have no morals." Chapter 5:16. The barbarian king was stunned for a moment. He had not expected that the other party would come looking for him because of something like this. Just for this? Just for something like this? You've killed many of our Frostwolf tribe's elders and priests. You want to wipe out our tribe? The middle-aged man shook his head and said, All the people who attacked the Shadowwolf tribe are dead. We didn't kill the rest. Of course, if other tribes were to abuse you, we wouldn't just stand by and watch. However, the barbarian king was no longer listening to what the other party was saying. The barbarian king let out a furious bellow, and a huge wolf phantom image rose up from his back. This was the wolf of disaster that had been passed down through the generations in the Frostwolf tribe, condensed from martial will. With the barbarian king's cultivation, this wolf of disaster that had been condensed from martial will could cause earthquakes, tempest, tsunamis, and even volcanic eruptions. When he attacked at full power, he could even contaminate his opponent's martial will and whittle away at his opponent's abilities. The barbarian king had once defeated over 100 second transition experts with a single howl from the wolf of disaster. He had even used the aura of disaster to whittle away the will of a second-tier demigod, causing his cultivation to drop to level 20. Even amongst the many divine-level experts in the Ice Plains, the barbarian king and his wolf of disaster were the best. The phantom image of the wolf of disaster let out a furious bellow and pounced toward the silver-haired middle-aged man with an endless aura of disaster. Before its body arrived, the strong gales it brought with it had already blown the entire tent away. The ground started to quake. Tornadoes appeared in the sky. The area within a range of 100 lis was filled with lightning storms. There were even cracks in the ground that spewed out streams of lava. Waves of calamities descended, and unstoppable will gushed out from the depths of despair. However, faced with the barbarian king's desperate attack, the silver-haired middle-aged man merely pouted and spat out a mouthful of saliva. His saliva shot out at lightning speed, dispersing the wolf of disaster's body and smashing the barbarian king's physical body. It flew out for several tens of kilometers and crushed a mountain in the distance. The martial will contained in the saliva crushed the barbarian king's will, killing this divine-level expert completely. The tempest stopped and the ground stopped trembling. However, the silver-haired middle-aged man wiped the corner of his mouth, as if he had just killed an ant. However, he suddenly stood up, lifted his head, and looked in the southwest direction with slight puzzlement. The short-haired youth asked curiously, "What's wrong, master?" The silver-haired middle-aged man's lips curled into a smile. Someone's mental cultivation method has reached level 10. Ah, the short-haired youth said doubtfully, isn't our lineage's mental cultivation method always passed down from generation to generation, with only one person in each generation? Why is there another person? The silver-haired middle-aged man's eyes were filled with doubt, followed by confusion. In the end, he smiled and shook his head. Interesting. He was supposed to be your disciple, but someone messed with him. Now, he's going to surpass you. Ah? Then what should we do? The short-haired youth asked. What else can we do? When he comes to the Ice Plains, you two just have a fight. Whoever wins will be the master. Then what if he doesn't want to? Our bloodline has always convinced people with virtue. You just have to beat him until he's convinced. But we still have to wait for him here. The short-haired young man was vexed. Can't we go over? The silver-haired middle-aged man shook his head, a look of nostalgia flashing in his eyes. I promised someone. Unless he dies, I won't be able to step out of the ice fields for the rest of my life. Elsewhere, as Miracle World was going through all sorts of changes, Fang Xinjian had also started his cultivation on Earth. In the desert in the northwest of Xian country, Fang Xinjian stood alone several tens of kilometers in the sky, looking down at the circular land. The Fang clan's matter has finally come to an end. Next, it's time for Miracle World. The first prince's matter has to be settled, and I also want to wipe out the Terrene Shrine. And he then thought of his mother's corpse, which had been taken away by the black-clothed man. Although he felt a little anxious, he felt that the black-clothed man did not harbor any ill intentions toward him. Moreover, regardless of whether it was the first prince, the Terrene shrine, or the unfathomable black-clothed man, he would need to be extremely powerful before he could come into contact with them and deal with them. Right now, the most important thing was to cultivate. I'll first cultivate my physical particles to perfection through the nuclear explosions. In Xian Country's command base, Fang Yuehe, Tyrant, and a few other generals from Xian Country and the Federation were gathered together. They looked at Fang Xinjian on the screen with different expressions. Plan 312 has officially begun. The first nuclear explosion has begun. Warhead with a yield of 500,000 tons has been loaded. Preparations for Southwind 41 have been completed. Fang Yuehe watched as the intercontinental missile was being prepared step by step. There was still a hint of worry on his face. After all, Fang Xinjian had now become the Fang clan's greatest pillar of support. Although many of the clans in the Federation seemed to have submitted to him, there were still many people who were secretly restless. One could imagine that if Fang Xinjian were to make the slightest mistake, countless hungry wolves would pounce out and devour the entire Fang clan. He could not understand why Fang Xinjian would want to carry out a nuclear experiment. It would be fine if there was no danger, but if there were to be any injuries, it would be terrible. At the next moment, the intercontinental missile rose into the air, piercing through the clouds at a speed of Mach 2 and smashing toward Fang Xinjian. Just as it was about to collide with Fang Xinjian, the nuclear missile exploded. A nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons was naturally a far cry from one with a yield of 50 million tons. However, the shock waves, heat energy, and light radiation that were unleashed in that instant were still terrifying. This was especially so for the high temperature and high pressure in the center. It was sufficient to turn all matter in human civilization into dust. However, Fang Xinjian's body's toughness had reached the level of a level 29 divine weapon, and he was also protected by the heavenly abyss annihilation armor. In times of danger, he could even perform the sword of infiltrating void and hide in spatial gap. Therefore, he was not afraid of the nuclear missile's attack at all. Compared to the destructive prowess of the nuclear missile, he was more concerned about the stimulation that the various radiations from the nuclear missile would have on the physical particles in his body. Under the impact of the violent energy, Fang Xinjian could sense countless radiations and particle currents colliding against the physical particles in his body. Under such stimulation, the physical particles in his body started to wake up, lighting up like many candles. After about 1/10 of a second, Fang Xinjian felt that his physical body had reached its limits and was about to break down. Therefore, he performed the sword of infiltrating void and stepped into spatial gaps, once again comprehending the changes to the physical particles in his body. After a total of 20 minutes, an explosive bellow rang out 10,000 meters up in the sky. The mushroom cloud from the explosion was completely blown away, revealing Fang Xinjian's unscathed body. With just this explosion, Fang Xinjian could sense that 200 of the physical particles in his body had awakened. Although the prowess of a nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons was a far cry from that of a nuclear missile with a yield of 50 million tons, what Fang Xinjian needed was not high temperature and pressure. What he needed was nuclear radiation. Nuclear radiation with a yield of 500,000 tons would allow him to be enveloped in it for a longer period of time. Therefore, a nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons was more suitable for him, and the effects were also better. Waves of majestic energy burst out from the physical particles, filling up both inside and outside of his body. They formed streams of electricity that moved around his body. Nuclear missiles contain the profoundness of the microscopic world, and physical particles are also things in the microscopic domain of Miracle World. It's because I've inherited Miracle World's bloodline and possess the human body structure of Miracle World that my body is formed from one. 0.8 billion physical particles. Nuclear explosions release the power of the microscopic world. However, such explosions can also stimulate the eruption of physical particles. It's like splitting the world apart, opening up the small world of the physical particles in my body. There's no problem. As long as I use the sword of infiltrating void to prevent myself from getting injured during each explosion, I'll be able to cultivate through nuclear explosions and stimulate all 1.08 billion physical particles. Not only that, but a nuclear explosion with a yield of 500,000 tons would be easier for Fang Xinjian to control. It would be easier for him to control it, and it would also be less likely to affect the environment and magnetic fields, destroy electronic devices, and cause social unrest. Chapter 5:17. A series of thoughts flashed through Fang Xinjian's mind. In the next moment, he opened his eyes and made an OK gesture towards the sky. Seeing this from the satellite's detection, Fang Yuehe nodded and said, "Let's continue. Launch another nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons." Just like that, Fang Xinjian endured the bombardment of the nuclear bombs time and time again. More and more of the physical particles in his body were stimulated, and the energy in his body skyrocketed like a tsunami. In fact, due to the increasing amount of energy erupting from the physical particles, he was not used to it all of a sudden. This caused his entire body to continuously erupt with waves of light radiation, forming rings of light halos. In the beginning, many families had observed Fang Xinjian's nuclear experiment. When they learned that Fang Xinjian had used a nuclear warhead with a yield of 500,000 tons, they didn't take it seriously. After all, Li Shuanghua had been able to resist a 50-megaton nuclear bomb before, so what could a 500,000 megaton nuclear bomb do? However, as they watched Fang Xinjian launch the nuclear bombs one after another and come out unscathed each time, all the clans started to be shocked. After a day and a night, thousands of nuclear warheads exploded on Fang Xinjian's body. All the observing families were shocked. At this moment, the nuclear explosion stopped. It was not because Fang Xinjian could not take it anymore, but because the large amount of nuclear radiation and particle flow had caused serious damage to the ground, causing a large number of electronic devices to be damaged. There were simply too many nuclear bombs exploding. Even though Fang Xinjian was tens of kilometers up in the sky, he was still affected. Therefore, Fang Xinjian changed his method. Anyway, as long as there was nuclear radiation, it could stimulate the physical particles in his body. Therefore, he went directly to the largest nuclear power plant today. Without wearing any protective clothing, he walked directly to the reactor. In order to further receive the impact of the nuclear reaction, he performed the infiltrating void sword and walked into the nuclear reactor, personally starting to experience the fission chain reaction. The flow of particles bombarded Fang Xinjian's body in a frenzy. Physical particles awakened one after another, bursting forth with waves of energy. As the amount of energy that could be used in his body increased, Fang Xinjian's sword art's prowess grew stronger even though his physical body did not improve much. Among the 5 great perfection realms, the strength of one's body determined one's defense. Specialty seeds determined physical strength. The reorganization of the brain determined the body's recovery ability, the brain's calculation ability, and the strength of one's will. The ether organs determined one's acceptance of ether particles' information and energy, as well as energy recovery ability and insight. The number of physical particles determined the power of the skill. The more physical particles he activated, the more energy he stored, and the more powerful his skills would be. The greater the degree of perfection, the better the development of the human body. When the time came for them to strive for the divine level, the more powerful their powers would be after their consciousness had materialized. Now that he had more energy to propel his sword techniques, the prowess of Fang Xinjian's 5 god-slaying swords became even stronger. The sword of infiltrating void could enter a wider range of spatial gaps, and its speed was also faster. With the light pursuit sword ripples, Fang Xinjian could now unleash 9 million light pursuit sword ripples at one go. With the all-conquering sword, Fang Xinjian could now open up a valley that was over 10 kilometers wide with a single sword attack. He could also destroy a nuclear missile with a yield of 500,000 tons with a single sword attack. With the instant sword, the range it could unleash had broken through 100 meters, reaching 120 meters. However, Fang Xinjian was still not satisfied. He plunged headfirst into the reactor and did not come out. The physical particles in his body increased crazily at the speed of a rocket, and he would only come out to rest when his physical body could not take it anymore. 1,000. 10,000. 100,000. 1 million. 10 million. In just a single day, the number of physical particles that had awakened in Fang Xinjian's body had reached a total of 10 million. However, compared to the total of 1.08 billion physical particles, it was still far too little. Therefore, Fang Xinjian spent almost every single day immersed in the reactor. His physical body continued to receive impacts from various nuclear and light radiations, and his powers increased like a rocket. Later on, Fang Xinjian even dragged Tyrant into the reactor with him to condense physical particles through nuclear reactions. Tyrant was a demigod with 2 tiers of perfection to begin with, and he had even engulfed the corpses of 2 divine-level experts. Right now, his 5 attributes had all broken through 500 points. Although his martial will was many times weaker than Fang Xinjian's, his physical body was several tens of times stronger than Fang Xinjian's. Dashing into the nuclear reactor, with Fang Xinjian occasionally performing the infiltrating void to help, Fang Xinjian's cultivation increased at a rapid rate. Just like that, the two of them immersed themselves in the reactor for 3 months. 3 months later, Fang Yuehe, who had become the undisputed person in charge of the Fang clan and a top-notch character in the world, was now waiting obediently at the entrance of the nuclear power plant. Simultaneously, there were many magic prince warriors hidden in the countless mountains, in the sky, and on the ground in the surroundings. They seemed to be waiting for Fang Xinjian. They were extremely curious about how Fang Xinjian, who had stayed in the nuclear power plant for a total of 3 months, was doing. After a very long time, the door of the nuclear power plant opened slowly, and 2 figures walked out. However, when Fang Yuehe saw the 2 of them, he broke into an astonished expression. Both of their hair had grown very long, but it was no longer draped over their shoulders like ordinary people. Instead, their hair was fluttering like flames burning on the top of their heads. What was even more amazing was that as their hair fluttered like flames, they were also emitting a white glow. From afar, it was as if there were balls of white flames burning on their heads. Their bodies were also emitting streams of faint white light, accompanied by hints of faint electric currents exploding outside their bodies occasionally. Looking at the 2 of them who kept on glowing, Fang Yuehe opened his mouth and said, "What is going on with the 2 of you?" Tyrant did not say anything. Fang Xinjian said, "The energy is too strong, and we keep on releasing radiation. We'll probably need a few weeks to get used to it." He threw a glance at Fang Yuehe and said, "Make some preparations. I won't be staying on Earth for long. I'll be returning to Miracle World soon." Elsewhere, on the western coast of Miracle World, close to the area where the 2 worlds overlapped, 9 men in gray robes stood in void space, looking at the seawater under their feet without moving. "They're not here yet? We've already waited for 3 months. We might as well head over to the other side." "This won't do. The diabolic energy on the other side is too thin. We might fail miserably." "How is that possible? For the past 3 months, the density of ether particles and diabolic energy has increased rapidly, and our cultivation has improved tremendously. On the other hand, Fang Xinjian has been staying on the other side all this while. His cultivation has probably stagnated. That's right. With our achievements over the past 3 months, we'll be able to crush Fang Xinjian. Let's wait. As the last male voice rang out, the other 8 people disappeared one by one, leaving only one person standing in void space, scanning the seas before him. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.